Chapter 34-26. Rise. Xiaohua didn't have time to say anything. With a wave of his hand, the water bottle in the Buddhist Sarira's hand appeared in his hand. Of course, when he took it out, Xiaohua didn't forget to leave the willow branch in the Linglong Pagoda. Seeing Xiaohua take out the water bottle, Gu Zhen's eyes lit up. He didn't dare to be negligent. He stimulated his karma, and the Buddha's light on the alms bowl appeared again. He tried his best to collect the poisonous water that had begun to overflow. Collect. Xiaohua held the water bottle with one hand and formed a seal with the other hand. A pure Buddha's light came out of the water bottle and turned into a lotus seed pod that covered Gu Zhen's back. The poisonous water that gushed out of the water wall and seeped through the water wall was all sucked into the water bottle. When the threat of the poisonous water dripping into Gu Zhen's Buddha's light was removed, the Buddha's light from the water bottle rushed in front of Gu Zhen again. The huge suction force was even stronger than Gu Zhen's alms bowl. Nearly 60% of the water waves rushed into it. Boom! A loud sound that sounded like raging waves crashing against the shore came from behind everyone. The collapsed water wall and the poisonous water that surged in were like the waves of a rising tide, surging up violently from behind. It was almost visible to the naked eye. Great Master Gu Zhen, you take the lead, I'll take the back. Let's work together. Xiaohua's hand formed a Buddha's seal, and he called out in high spirits. Gu Zhen seemed to be infected, and he roared. As you wish. Let's go. For a moment, the entire water tunnel was filled with Buddha's light. The previous vast and surging water was obediently subdued by the two Buddha's light. Like a python, it rushed into the two Buddha's treasures. The strange thing was, after the poisonous water was collected, the water wall on the left immediately turned into a flat mirror without the slightest ripple or crack. However, Xiaohua and the other three flew over. In just a few breaths, the collapsed water ripples behind them reached them. These flat mirror surfaces immediately broke, and the water waves surged again. The poisonous water still gushed out, therefore, a very dangerous scene appeared in the tunnel. Within the entire tunnel, there were several zhang of space that was calm. Moreover, this several zhang of calm was rapidly moving forward along with the different heights of the tunnel. In front of this section of calm was a seemingly boundless river, and behind this section of calm were monstrous waves that chased after one's buttocks. This situation was extremely similar to the collapse of the tunnel that Xiaohua encountered in the void. Even though the situation was very dangerous, the sound of the wind stirred up by the poisonous water chasing after them was already whistling in their ears. However, Gu Zhen, who was in front, had Xiaohua's help, so the situation was already very good. Especially since Xiaohua's water bottle obviously had a stronger suction force than the alms bowl, so it could contain more poisonous water. Gu Zhen only needed to grasp the right direction and guide the Buddha's light from the water bottle. For the time being, the lives of Xian and the others would not be in danger. However, after Xiaohua and Gu Zhen flew for the time it took for an incense stick to burn, the surging poisonous water seemed to be endless. Even someone as strong as Xiaohua's arm felt sore and numb. The water bottle was getting heavier and heavier. The amount of telekinesis required to activate the water bottle was also increasing. At this moment, Xiaohua finally understood Gu Zhen's previous predicament. The pressure of the poisonous water in front of them was increasing wave after wave, and his telekinesis could only be activated layer by layer. Not only was the water bottle on the verge of breaking out of his control, the suction force of the water bottle was also about to break out of his control. Damn it, the person who set up this formation is really sinister. Xiaohua unconsciously cursed in his heart. This poisonous water can only be frozen and collected. Collecting is just like right now. However much this Xiao collects, the formation will replenish that amount. Just like what Xian said, this force is superimposed. In the end, it will be unimaginably powerful. If not for this Zhao's astonishing divine power, others would have already been crushed to death by the poisonous water. But what about after being frozen? Escaping through the layer of ice, the person who set up the formation must have some other backup plan. What is this backup plan? When I set up the formation? As Xiaohua pondered, he actually began to think about how to set up the formation. It must be said that this was the biggest difference between a formation master and an ordinary cultivator. At this moment, Gu Zhan's slightly tired voice came. Tipu, this old monk's telekinesis can still support this formation, but my arms are already exhausted. I can't control the alms bowl. What do you think we should do? Alright. Hearing this, Xiaohua stretched out his hand and flew forward. He shouted. This junior will take this alms bowl. Grandmaster, you can use your telekinesis as much as you want. As soon as the alms bowl entered his hand, another heavy force pressed down on Xiaohua's arm. Xiaohua's body suddenly fell straight down for more than a few feet. Only then did he stop and continue to fly forward. After flying for another half a cup of tea's time, Xiaohua really couldn't bear it anymore. He roared. Fellow Taoist Xian, how long is this water tunnel? Although this little monk's Buddhist treasure can still hold the poisonous water, the impact of this formation is really too great. It's already beyond the range of what ordinary cultivators can bear. This Xian's heart had actually been clenched all this time. Now that she heard Xiaohua's words, her heart sank even deeper. She bit her lips and said, As for how long it is exactly, I don't know. Perhaps we're about to reach the end? Ai Xiaohua sighed. Now that he had already boarded the pirate ship, how could he still hold anything back? Let's talk about it later if we can save our lives. Saying this, Xiaohua's entire body flashed with Buddhist light. He was about to use the heavenly law embodiment technique. Boom, a long whimpering sound rang out. It was like the sound of the bellows in an ordinary household being forcefully pulled out. Xiaohua felt that the enormous force in front of him suddenly disappear, and the strength he had gathered suddenly disappeared. Normally, Xiaohua would naturally be able to control it. However, right now he was using the heavenly law embodiment technique, and had to use Buddhist light to conceal it. It was difficult for him to do three things at once. As a result, the water bottle and alms bowl in his hand simultaneously flew out of his hand. Even his body lost balance in midair. Fortunately, it was only a few breaths of time. Xiaohua's body naturally swept forward. He used the ethereal steps and stabilized his body. With a raise of his hand, the water bottle and alms bowl both fell between his two hands. Xiaohua didn't pay attention to it. However, when Xian, who had just rushed out of the tunnel, saw Xiaohua's footwork, her complexion greatly changed. Her gaze revealed a kind of severe expression. However, this severe expression and peculiar expression only flashed for a moment. It wasn't seen by the bystanders. As for Xiaohua, at this moment, he was calm and unruffled. He had the appearance of a naive little monk. He respectfully handed the alms bowl to Gu Zhan, who had followed behind him. However, just as he sent out his hand, his gaze swept behind Gu Zhan. He couldn't help but be stunned. He saw that behind Gu Zhan was a huge space. This space was filled with a kind of soft fluorescent light. Under the illumination of this fluorescent light, a sparkling and translucent crystal palace towered in the middle of this space. This crystal palace was very strange. It wasn't an ordinary palace. Instead, it had the appearance of a triangular tower. Moreover, this triangular tower was inverted. The huge palace that caused people's hearts to tremble stood erect at the top of this space. From the top of the palace, it shrunk layer by layer. In the end, it actually shrunk into a prism-like palace base that was inserted into the waves below everyone's feet. The waves rippled and the fluorescent light flickered. The entire palace seemed to sway in the air, as if it would collapse at any time. Gu Zhan's back was facing this palace. At first, he didn't care about it. However, Xiaohua's outstretched hand stopped in mid-air. Xiaohua's gaze passed over him and looked behind him. How could Gu Zhan not know the situation? He hurriedly released his Buddhist sense, wanting to investigate. However, his Buddhist sense couldn't leave his body no matter what. At this moment, Xi Hui and Xian's eyes also revealed extraordinary splendor. He couldn't help but turn his head. When he saw this situation, he couldn't help but be stunned. The fluorescent light of the inverted triangle was so alluring. It was like the supreme Buddhist light in the legends of Nirvana. Gu Zhan's heart was immediately attracted. Ba, seeing that the huge palace was getting bigger and heavier, Gu Zhan felt that he was about to be suppressed by the entire palace. When he was powerless to resist, a voice that was like the sound of nature came out from his ears. Suddenly, The heavy pressure of the palace disappeared in an instant. Everything in front of Guzhan's eyes returned to normal. The inverted triangle palace still flickered with an enchanting fluorescent light in the distance. He was still in the same posture of turning his head. Amitba Guzhan's face turned red. He knew that his mind had been invaded by the magic circle. He hurriedly turned his head and put his palms together. This old monk thanks you for the reminder. Xiaohua smiled and handed the alms bowl to Guzhan. He said, Master has consumed too much psyche power. Now that you are free, naturally your vigilance is greatly reduced. It's nothing. Even if this little monk didn't remind you, you will wake up after a while. Alas, this old monk is ashamed. Guzhan knew his own situation and didn't hide it. The knot in this old monk's heart for many years has been untied. It's rare for me to be relaxed. My defense against the magic circle has also been reduced. However, just now in the water tunnel, if it wasn't for your Buddhist treasure water bottle, this old monk would have been buried in it like Xian Tanua and Ci Hui. From this point of view, this old monk also has to thank you. Xiaohua naturally had a guilty conscience. He was afraid that Guzhan would recognize the water bottle. Then he thought of Ci Hang. Now that he heard Guzhan only said it was the water bottle, he was delighted. He hurriedly waved his hand and said, Master, you're too kind. How can this disciple's cultivation be compared with yours? It's just that this disciple has a handy Buddhist treasure. Besides, you were the first to make a move. Most of the credit is taken. This little monk is nothing. Master Guzhan on the side, Xian was naturally also captivated by the inverted triangular palace. She didn't wake up until Xiaohua chanted the name of Buddha. She hurriedly took out a small golden box from her bosom. After opening it, she took out a thumb-sized heart-shaped leaf. She interrupted the conversation between Guzhan and Xiaohua and handed it to Guzhan. She said, Stick this on your monk robe first. Jialuo golden leaf. Guzhan's gaze fell on the golden heart-shaped leaf in Xian's hand. He couldn't help but cry out. Xian nodded and urged again. Yes, this is it. Master, you'd better stick it on quickly. Okay. Guzhan didn't dare to neglect. He reached out to take it and stuck it on his monk robe. When the Jialuo golden leaf touched the robe, a layer of faint golden light appeared. This golden light flickered twice, and even the Jialuo golden leaf itself disappeared. However, Guzhan's monk robe didn't have any special changes. Chapter 34-27. Little monk, you stick it on too. Xian grumpily handed the other leaf to Xiaohua. Not only was she not grateful for Xiaohua's help, she was also unhappy that Xiaohua didn't explain it to her in advance. Xiaohua didn't break it down. He took the golden leaf and stuck it on his monk's robe like Guzhan. Seeing the golden leaf disappear, Xiaohua carefully examined it for a moment. It was the same as seeing it. He didn't feel that the golden leaf had any special effect. Just as Xian and Ci Hui stuck the Gara golden leaves on their robes, Xiaohua took the opportunity to look around. This was an extremely large space. The water tunnel that Xiaohua and the other three rushed into had disappeared. There was only a smooth mirror under everyone's feet. The four figures were reflected in the mirror's fluorescent light, one positive and one negative. It was almost impossible to distinguish which one was real and which one was fake. In this space, other than the smooth mirror, there was only the inverted triangular palace in the distance. There was nothing else. It was abnormally clean. Needless to say, this palace should be the core of the array. Xiaohua tried to release his Buddhist sense. Like Guzhan, his spiritual sense couldn't leave his body. He then released his soul sense. Fortunately, although his soul sense was suppressed, it could still leave his body. Because Xian and the others were beside him, Xiaohua didn't try. Even so, Xiaohua was secretly proud. He had one more method than others. Xian Tanua Ci Hui at the side put the golden leaf on and whispered, This Gara golden leaf is a treasure used by my Buddhist sect to conceal cultivation. This little monk heard that only Lane Temple has some preserved. Now that you took out so many, could it be that this palace has a restriction that specifically restrains my Buddhist sect? You didn't explain it before. Now can you explain it in detail so that we can make plans early? He Xian smiled and said, "You didn't say before because the time wasn't right. If we couldn't come here, what's the point of saying more? Oh right, little monk, your clear water bottle is pretty good. Where did you get it?" "I picked it up in a cave." Xiaohua was originally listening attentively. Since Xian suddenly asked, he naturally answered casually. After he finished speaking, he immediately realized that Xian was tricking him. Although this trick was very old-fashioned, Xiaohua still fell for it. Although Xiaohua spoke the truth, Xian pouted and coldly said, "There are many caves in the Pure Land world. You want to pick one for me?" "Sigh, some people. I always treat the truth as a lie, but I also treat a lie as the truth. There's nothing I can do about it." Xiaohua sighed. "My Buddha has a saying, if there is a Buddha in the heart, then everything is a Buddha. If there is no Buddha in the heart, then there is no Buddha in the sight. The vanity of man is nothing more than this." Little monk Xian was a little embarrassed and angry. She stamped her feet in the air. "That. Xian Tanua, I don't quite understand. Could it be that this golden leaf of Canaan has some special use?" Xiai Hui hurriedly asked. Xian rolled her eyes at Xiaohua and said, "This golden leaf of Canaan can conceal a Buddhist cultivation in the eyes of Arhat, but in the eyes of Taoist cultivators, it is called the invisible leaf. Many talismans used to conceal one's tracks in ancient times were refined from this item." At this point, Xian pointed at the inverted triangular palace in the distance and said, "This palace is called the Profound Water Palace. There are 2 profound water ancient beasts guarding the entrance. If we want to enter the Profound Water Palace through the Profound Water ancient beasts, we can only use the invisible leaf. Otherwise, we will be discovered before we can even get within 300 meters of the Profound Water Palace. I don't know how powerful these Profound Water ancient beasts are, but I don't think we can resist them." The Profound Water Palace? Xiaohua was a little puzzled when he heard this name. He opened his mouth to ask, but after muttering a few times he didn't say anything. "What are you muttering about? If you have something to say, say it quickly. If you have something to say, say it quickly." Xian naturally understood, and asked with a cold snort. Xiaohua scratched his hairless head and frowned. "Actually, I want to ask Benefactress, is this Profound Water Palace a place to hide treasures? Or is it a place to suppress demonic beasts? Is there a difference?" Xian looked at Xiaohua warily and asked. Xiaohua smiled and said, "Of course there's a difference. If it's a palace to hide treasures, there must be many powerful restrictions inside. As long as we break the restrictions, we can obtain the treasures. No matter what it is, it'll be a harvest. Moreover, we don't need to be greedy. Depending on how much we take, we can just turn around and leave. If it's a place to suppress demonic beasts, we have to be careful. I'm afraid there aren't many treasures. Even if there are, they were left behind by people who came here in the past. Moreover, the immortal artifact that Benefactress mentioned should be the Profound Water Palace's formation core. If you take the immortal artifact, the suppressed demonic beasts will definitely escape. Not to mention demonic beasts that harm all living beings. Even we can't escape, right? Earlier, I didn't dare to say too much for fear of disturbing Benefactress's mood. But now, I have no choice but to say it. Hehe, I didn't expect you to have such a compassionate heart after just shaving your head and becoming a monk." Xian rolled her eyes at Xiaohua again and said mockingly, "However, I haven't entered yet. How would I know what's inside?" The ink cloud pupil records that there's an immortal artifact here, and nothing else. Let's go in first. If it's a treasure trove, that's the best. If that immortal artifact is used to suppress demonic beasts, then let's see if the demonic beasts are dead or not. Don't think that only your Buddhist sex Arhat has a compassionate heart. We Confucian cultivators aren't inferior to you. At this point, Xian felt that her words were somewhat harsh to the ears. She smiled embarrassedly at Xiai Hui and Guzhen. However, Xiaohua didn't let Xian off the hook. He shook his head slightly and said, "Benefactress Xian, I'll be honest with you. Earlier, I promised senior brother Xiai Hui to come in and take a look because I was curious. Moreover, to tell Benefactress the truth, I felt like old friends with senior brother Ci Hui at first sight, and also wanted to protect him. But now, take a look for yourself. You haven't even entered the profound water palace. It's only a water maze and a passage filled with poisonous water. Yet it's already so powerful. It seems that aside from me, all three of you are injured. What does this mean? It means that the profound water palace is even more dangerous. It's far from a place that 4th or 5th grade cultivators like us can enter. There are ancient mysteries that we can't come into contact with inside. Even if we're lucky enough to enter that so-called immortal artifact, in my opinion, Benefactress Xian won't be able to obtain it. Rather than throwing our lives away and not being able to obtain the immortal artifact, why should we go in? Why don't we turn around and enjoy the scenery and have a heart-to-heart talk? Xiaohua then looked at Gu Zhen and said, Moreover, Grandmaster Gu Zhen's reason for coming in was to see the corpse of his blood brother. Now you've gotten what you wanted. Although the ancient Buddhist shrine is indeed attractive, it might not be in the profound water palace. Therefore, Grandmaster Gu Zhen, you should know the dangers of greed. You don't need me to say anything, right? Little monk, what do you mean by that? Xian was anxious and raised her eyebrows. Nothing. Xiaohua smiled and said, Benefactress, if you don't tell me the truth about the profound water palace, I won't enter. Perhaps senior brother Ci Hui is willing to go in with you, but Grandmaster Gu Zhen might not be willing, right? Although Grandmaster Gu Zhen didn't say anything, in Xian's eyes, Gu Zhen's silence meant that his thoughts were similar to Xiaohua's. After all, there were 2 profound water beasts guarding the profound water palace. Who knew if the golden cane and leaf would be useful? Seeing Xian's expression fluctuating, Ci Hui said, Xian Sandinyu, junior brother Tipu's words are reasonable. The 2 places from before caused me to be alarmed. I know I can't pass through those 2 obstacles alone. Of course, since we're already here, why don't we take a few more steps and enter the profound water palace to take a look? However, since we're going to enter the profound water palace, we should at least be aware of the dangers inside, right? Fellow Taoist Ci Hui, could it be that you don't trust me? Xian's face was slightly pale as she spoke softly. Ci Hui smiled and said, It's not that I don't trust you. I feel that Sandinyu might be a little stubborn. Could it be that there's something you don't want to say that affects your judgment and makes you insist on entering the profound water palace while ignoring the dangers inside? If Sandinyu can tell us, then we can also make a judgment. Xian bit her lips and looked at Ci Hui and Gu Zhen, but she didn't look at Xiaohua. Instead, she raised her head and looked at the profound water palace in the distance. After half the time it took to brew a cup of tea, she said, Actually, I've indeed concealed some things from you. However, please don't worry. I don't have any ill intentions. Moreover, the dangers I told fellow Taoist Ci Hui about before were all recorded in the profound water palace. It's fine. Gu Zhen said with a smile. This old monk has remembered every word of what Tanyu said to this old monk. This old monk feels that what Tanyu said is true. Xian bowed and said, Many thanks for your trust, Grandmaster Gu Zhen. What I've concealed is the purpose of entering the profound water palace. My goal isn't the so-called immortal artifact. Ah? Not the immortal artifact? Then what do you want? Xiaohua was surprised. Is it that demon beast? Xian didn't even look at Xiaohua. It seemed like she was still angry with him. She only said to Gu Zhen, The Darkwater Palace is the core of an ancient formation, and the core of the Darkwater Palace is the immortal artifact. Of course, the immortal artifact isn't the formation core of the Darkwater Palace. It's even to the extent that the Darkwater Palace isn't a place where treasures are kept. I'm sure of that. However, I don't know if the profound water palace is used to suppress the immortal artifact, or if it's used to suppress some demon beast. What I do know is that the immortal artifact can suppress all living things in the 3 continents. If someone wants to suppress a criminal and make that criminal suffer under the immortal artifact, the profound water palace is the best place to do so. Oh, I understand. Gu Zhen nodded and revealed a look of realization. Xian Sandinyu is looking for someone. She's looking for someone who might be suppressed in the profound water palace. Chapter 34-28. Alas, that's right. Xian looked disappointed. This person isn't a heinous criminal like Venerable Master thinks, nor is he a treacherous person. He shouldn't be tortured like this. Xian paused and smiled wryly. This matter involves my secrets, so forgive me for not being able to speak of it. My purpose in coming here is to see if this person is here. If he is, I want to see if I can rescue him. That's all. As for the immortal artifact, haha, I'm only at the 4th grade of origin energy. I'm afraid I can't take it for myself, right? Xian glared fiercely at Xiaohua and continued. That's what I wanted to say. If some people aren't satisfied and don't wish to enter the profound water palace, I won't force them. However, if he wanted to leave this ancient formation, the only way out was inside the Blackwater Palace. Of course, if anyone thinks they're strong enough to break the ancient formation, feel free to use your cultivation. I'll wait and see. Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he saw Xian roll her eyes. Ahem. Xi Hui coughed twice, smiled and persuaded. Junior brother Tipu, in this little monk's opinion, what Xian Tanua said is right. At this time, they have been honest with each other. She did not hide anything. Think about it. If she didn't want to say anything and only said that the exit was within the profound water palace, I'm sure junior brother would have to enter based on that alone, right? Why would she make up more lies? That's true. Xiaohua nodded. He also felt that Xian's words were true since she'd been forced to this point. Since that's the case, why don't you help her? Xi Hui felt that Xiaohua's Buddhist abilities might surpass hers, so she took advantage of the situation and said, saving a life is better than building a 7-storied pagoda. Junior brother, don't tell me you don't know this? Isn't she still alive? Xiaohua curled his lips. Haha, it'll be too late if she's dead. Guzhen laughed. Xian Tanua said that there might be a Buddhist treasure within the ancient formation, and even an ancient Buddhist luster. It must be in the profound water palace, right? Xian was about to stomp her feet when she heard Xiaohua's words. However, she could only reply. If Mo Yuntong's records are correct, it should be in the profound water palace. However, I don't know the exact location. Look, little monk, come with us. You'll benefit from it as well, said Guzhen. Xiaohua thought for a moment and said with a smile. Benefactress, you just said that you only want to see if there is anyone suppressed under the immortal artifact. Presumably, you have also prepared a method to rescue that person. Yes, this one has indeed made some preparations. Xian didn't hide anything and spoke the truth. It's special. You don't plan on taking that immortal artifact either. Xiaohua immediately asked. What? Junior apprentice brother Tipu, you want to take that immortal artifact? Xi Hui was shocked. What if the immortal artifact is used to suppress powerful demonic beasts? Aren't you helping the evildoer? Hehe, what if the demonic beast is not suppressed? What if this profound water palace is only used to suppress the immortal artifact? Xiaohua said with a smile. Can this little monk try to subdue this immortal artifact? Xian coldly looked at Xiaohua and asked curiously. You're just a little monk from a Buddhist sect. What do you want this immortal artifact for? Even if you can subdue it, will you be able to use it? I'm willing. If I can't use it, can't I give it to someone else? Even if I can't give it to someone else, can't I hang it in my meditation room and look at it myself? Xiaohua's neck stiffened as he retorted sarcastically. Greed, oh greed. Xi Hui lectured Xiaohua. You just reminded Ancestor Guzhen. Now, you're the one who's making the mistake. Forget it. This little monk was just saying. There's no need to mention it. Xiaohua waved his hand. He also felt that he was being delusional. An immortal artifact was definitely not a spiritual artifact or spiritual treasure. It had long surpassed the scope of his control. Since that's the case, little monk, you've said so much. Has your psychokinesis recovered? Can we proceed forward? Xian asked Xiaohua in a bad mood. Xiaohua shrugged and smiled. This little monk has more or less recovered. I wonder how senior brother Xi Hui and Grandmaster Guzhen are doing? Xi Hui didn't use much psychokinesis. She nodded slightly and looked at Guzhen. Guzhen nodded as well. This old monk has rested enough. We can enter the mysterious water palace. Xian heard this and said, "We have the invisible leaf on us. The ancient beast can't see us. Of course, we can't use any psychokinesis or magic power. We only need to fly to within 100 feet of the palace and walk through the palace gates. Once we enter the palace, the ancient beast will ignore us even if we overturn the heavens." "All right, we'll do as Xian says." Gu Zhen nodded. "We'll fly to within 100 feet of the palace. This old monk will go first, followed by Xian. Xi Hui and Tipu will bring up the rear as usual." Seeing that no one had any objections, Gu Zhen took the lead. When he was within 100 feet of the palace, he landed early and silently made his way to the palace. Xiaohua followed Xi Hui and descended from the cloud. His feet stepped on the smooth surface of the mirror. The surface of the mirror looked smooth, but his feet were soft. It was as if he was stepping on water plants. There was no need to be too careful because there was no sound at all. Xiaohua looked down and released his soul sense. He couldn't see anything strange about the mirror. It was like a wall, blocking his soul sense and preventing him from seeing what was going on inside. Strange. Xiaohua didn't understand. The mysterious water palace might be difficult to enter, but in front of it, if one has the strength of a 5th or 6th stage cultivator, or some special divine ability, it's not impossible to enter. If a female disciple from a scholarly family like Xian can come, others can as well. Why didn't they leave any traces behind? Even if they don't have a small Qianquan pouch, it's normal to leave some bones behind, right? Were they all eaten by the mysterious water beasts? Xiaohua couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine. He turned to look at the mysterious water palace 100 feet away. Perhaps it was because of the distance, or perhaps it was because of the mysterious water palace's devilish light. Xiaohua only felt that the triangular shape of the palace was very strange. But now that he was closer, the light on the palace's surface dimmed, revealing the mysterious water palace's true appearance. Rather than calling the mysterious water palace a palace, it was more accurate to say that it was a building made up of 4 triangles. The huge triangular structure towered in front of everyone's eyes with sharp edges and corners. It was very different from the smooth and flat palaces they usually saw. On the other side of the triangular structure, there were layers of protrusions in a very regular pattern. These protrusions were like window frames, but also like doors. They were strung together like some sort of rune, but they didn't give off any fluctuations of spiritual energy. The only thing that did give off fluctuations was the faint, watery light that flowed over the protrusions. The light was made up of very strange runes, like flowing water that constantly flowed between the protrusions. The dazzling light was also emitted by the flowing runes. Xiaohua looked at the strands of spiritual energy that flowed with the runes and gathered from the space, creating extremely orderly and rhythmic fluctuations of spiritual energy. He fell into deep thought. He had seen many formations and many spiritual energy fluctuations, but the spiritual energy fluctuations of the mysterious water palace gave him a strange feeling. Of course, these fluctuations were undoubtedly from the Dao Sex formations. Although the runes on the mysterious water palace were obscure and extremely simple, Xiaohua could still see traces of the Dao Sex talismans. However, the seemingly smooth flow of runes made Xiaohua feel as if there was a fishbone stuck in his throat. It was just like when he overused his Dharma eye in the vein of space that day. Could it be that this ancient formation is different from the one now? Xiaohua frowned and pondered as he walked. At that moment, an extremely loud rumble resounded in the space, and the huge mysterious water palace actually began to slowly rotate. As the mysterious water palace rotated, the orderly protrusions on the triangular structure on the side of the mysterious water palace slowly opened. Balls of emerald light flew out from the protrusions, and immediately transformed into strange runes. Thousands of runes gathered together, and emitted a buzzing sound. A huge suction force was generated from the runes, and rushed towards the walls of the space. Puff puff puff, the suction force landed on the mirror-like walls of water, creating huge whirlpools that were extremely similar to the whirlpools on the Nightmare Reef. At the same time, gusts of wind were generated from the whirlpools. A huge amount of spiritual energy rushed out from the whirlpools and fell on the triangular structure of the mysterious water palace. Oh no! Xiaohua and the others were alarmed. The change in the mysterious water palace had come too suddenly. The four of them had no time to react, especially now that they were within 300 meters of the mysterious water palace. If what Xian said was true, then any spell or Buddhist ability would attract the attention of the mysterious water ancient beast. Although Xiaohua and the others had yet to see the mysterious water ancient beast and didn't know when it would appear, if they used any ability to resist this change, it would definitely attract the attention of the mysterious water ancient beast. But what if they didn't use their ability to resist? The wind was so bitingly cold and even stronger. Xiaohua's body might be able to withstand it, but Xian and the others definitely couldn't. What should they do? Benefactor Xian, Xiaohua called out almost without hesitation. How about we just charge into the mysterious water palace with the wind? Xian's face was pale. She almost cried out. Please don't do that. Mo Yuntong clearly said that the profound water palace is the core of the ancient formation and has the most powerful restrictions. The entrance to the profound water palace is the only safe way to enter. If you try to enter from any other place, you'll die. Roar at this moment. A deafening roar came from the direction of the mysterious water palace. Mysterious water ancient beast. Everyone who was trying their best to maintain their balance turned ghastly pale. Wasn't this the perfect time to say that blessings don't come in pairs and misfortunes don't come singly? Chapter 34:29. Now that things have come to this, I'm afraid this is the only way. Xiaohua's figure gradually floated up. His soul sense swept through the water-type spiritual energy around him like a whirlwind. He hastily waved his hand and held the clear water bottle in his hand. He had no choice but to risk being discovered by the ancient beast. He formed a seal with his right hand and hit the clear water bottle. With a light sound, a faint blue color rushed out of the bottle. Xiaohua hastily shouted, "This is innate primordial water. Everyone, don't look directly at it." Xian, and the others were originally flustered, hesitating whether or not to use their divine abilities. When they saw Xiaohua take out the clear water bottle, they also looked at it with their eyes. When the innate primordial water appeared, the three's gazes had already fallen into it. Their minds stagnated, and their faces revealed absent-minded expressions. Fortunately, Xiaohua's shout came in time. Everyone was shocked and hurriedly focused their minds. Soon after, they understood what Xiaohua was thinking. At the same time, they closed their eyes and hurriedly used all kinds of methods. Very quickly, they stabilized their footsteps in the innate pure water. Since everyone had stabilized their footing, Xiaohua's innate primordial water also enveloped everyone. The previous, woo-woo sounds of ghostly wails and wolf howls instantly quieted down. There was no sound in the innate primordial water, but the situation outside the innate primordial water grew increasingly grim. Countless water-type spiritual energy of heaven and earth let out hoarse roars and wantonly collided in the air. A huge amount of spiritual energy of heaven and earth also rushed in where the innate primordial water was. But when this pure spiritual energy of heaven and earth rushed into the innate primordial water, it immediately became a part of the innate primordial water. Not even a trace of a ripple was formed. Aowo, the previously very tyrannical beast, roared again. But this time, it wasn't just one beast, but two. One pounced in the direction of Xiaohua and the others, and the other went in the opposite direction. Along with this roar, a dark blue figure with the same color as the innate primordial water flashed in mid-air, and arrived several hundred feet above the innate primordial water. It was a strange beast that was about 10 feet long. It looked like an ordinary leopard. Not only were the muscles on its four muscular legs bulging, there were also wisps of blue mist lingering around it. On the ferocious beast's head, the two eyes emitted a blue light. The beast's mouth with long fangs was now raised as the beast's head rose. Wave after wave of world spirit energy rushed into the blackwater ancient beast's mouth. Looking at the back of the ancient beast, there were two feather wings that were a few feet long, flashing slightly. In front of the feather wings, there were several sharp bone spurs that were shining with a blue brilliance. A tail that was about 10 feet long casually curled in the air, like a spirit snake. However, this spirit snake was really powerful. With a slight swing, not only was the hurricane cut apart, even the void had cracks in it. The ancient beast flew above the primordial water and opened its mouth. It took a deep breath and its body trembled involuntarily. Even the blue light around it trembled as if it was breathing. Then, the ancient beast raised its head slightly and spread its wings again. Just as it was about to fly away, the ancient beast's gaze fell on the primordial water below it. Ayo! Another extremely loud roar rang out. The profound water ancient beast flapped its wings as if it was facing a great enemy. The bone spikes protruding from its wings extended another few feet. What was special was that the blue light on the bone spikes was even deeper. 100 meters was like taking a stroll in the park for the ancient beast. With a flap of its wings, its entire body blurred. When the brilliance faded, it had already pounced to the side of the primordial water. The ancient beast looked at the primordial water, and its eyes emitted a brilliant blue light. The blue light shot into the primordial water and immediately disappeared. The mysterious water ancient beast hurriedly shook its head as if it had a headache. Then, the ancient beast opened its mouth and spat out a mouthful of blue light without hesitation. The fist-sized light emitted a whistling sound, covering the sound of the wind in the space. It was enough to show the power of the light. Boom! The light rushed into the innate primordial water. The primordial water, which did not have a single ripple under the impact of countless spiritual energies, started to sway rapidly. As it swayed, the light suddenly exploded, as if a powerful hand was trying to tear the primordial water apart. Although Xiaohua couldn't see the situation outside, he didn't dare to be careless when he saw the primordial water being attacked. He hurriedly activated the bottle, and more primordial water rushed out. After a while, the primordial water that had almost been blasted to pieces slowly healed, and returned to its original appearance. The Xianshui ancient beast opened its mouth again. This time no blue light rushed out. Instead, a great suction force appeared, as if it wanted to swallow the primordial water into its mouth. The Xianshui ancient beast was an ancient monster that was born with the ability to control water. Even the Xiantian primordial water could not escape its control. As the ancient beast opened its mouth, the thin layer of primordial water immediately rose and shot into the ancient beast's mouth. Xiaohua, who was hiding in the primordial water, was shocked again. He was guarding against the ancient beast's attack, but he didn't expect the ancient beast to be greedy and want to swallow the primordial water. Caught off guard, not only was the primordial water sucked up half a foot of the primordial water, even the bottle almost fell from his hand. Xiaohua's heart clenched again. He hurriedly activated his telekinesis and hit the bottle with Buddhist seals, trying his best to resist the ancient beast's suction force. Unfortunately, Xiaohua's opponent was not a profound ancient beast. Even if he used all his strength on telekinesis, he was far from being able to resist the ancient beast's gentle opening of its mouth. The primordial water was being sucked up, and was about to be thrown into the ancient beast's mouth. Once the primordial water disappeared, Xiaohua and the others would naturally be exposed. At that time, their lives would probably be in danger. Of course, his own life was more precious than the primordial water. Xiaohua understood this better than anyone else. Therefore, he didn't hesitate to pour out the primordial water from the bottle. He even happily poured out the poisonous water that he just put into the bottle. He wanted to see what would happen when the poisonous water was sent into the ancient beast's mouth. The Xianshui ancient beast was clearly taken aback by the surging poisonous water. It looked around in confusion, and then impatiently opened its mouth. As it roared, the poisonous water and the Xiantian primordial water obediently fell into the Xianshui ancient beast's mouth. Although Xiaohua couldn't see the situation outside the primordial water, just the thought of the poisonous water falling into the ancient beast's mouth made him secretly happy. Xian, and the others didn't know what was going on outside. They couldn't even open their eyes, so now they were like blind people. Previously, it was still silent, but now, it was as if thunder and lightning were flashing in the surroundings. It was even more frightening than the sound of the wind in the space. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the gluttonous ancient beast didn't swallow much of the primordial water, but drank a lot of the poisonous water. It seemed to be choking a little. Its body trembled slightly, and light flowed out like water. Oh, another roar sounded. It seemed to come from another ancient beast. It seemed to have lost its patience and stopped devouring. Then, it raised its head and roared in response. The two ancient beasts roared at each other. Then the ancient beast opened its mouth again, as if it wouldn't stop until it had devoured all of the primordial water. Suddenly, a strange rumbling sound came from the slowly rotating triangle of the profound water palace in the distance. A faint layer of mist seeped out from the blue radiance, and the entire protrusion of the profound water palace began to tremble rapidly. Along with the trembling, an indescribable fluctuation filled the entire space. In an instant, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was thrown into chaos. Not only that, but when the fluctuation came, the ancient beast was stunned. A trace of fear actually flashed through its eyes. Before its fear disappeared, a series of sobbing sounds came from the vortexes in the walls. This time, it wasn't pure water-type spiritual energy that rushed out of the vortexes, but true Saint River water mixed with bones, corpses, birds, and fish. After the formation was opened, the Saint River water poured in like a formation. The ancient beast seemed to be extremely shocked. It no longer cared about the primordial water, and raised its head to roar. It spread its wings and turned into a stream of light, rushing towards the profound water palace. The profound water palace, which looked like it was being rotated by a giant, also slowly stopped. In just a moment, the entire space was filled with river water. Apart from the thousands of tiny vortexes that were still spinning rapidly, the so-called walls had disappeared. The entire profound water palace was completely submerged in the Saint River. Xiao Hua was overjoyed to see the ancient beast's suction force disappear, but he didn't dare to be careless. He still carefully urged his telekinesis to control the suction force of the clear water bottle, preventing the ancient beast from launching a sneak attack. Junior brother Tipu Ci Hui closed his eyes and didn't dare to release his Buddhist awareness, but he still keenly sensed the change in Xiao Hua's telekinesis. He didn't speak when Xiao Hua's telekinesis was at its peak, but now that he felt much calmer, he said softly, "Is the ancient beast nearby? Can the primordial water stop the ancient beast? Did the ancient beast attack the primordial water just now?" Ci Hui's voice was very soft. So soft that he didn't want to disturb the ancient beast outside the primordial water. However, it was quiet inside the primordial water, so the other three heard him clearly. Xiao Hua also lowered his voice and said, "The ancient beast came just now and seemed to have discovered us." "Oh, it's not us. It must have discovered the innate true water, and wanted to devour it. However, this little monk fed it with the poisonous water just now and it's not moving anymore. I wonder if it was poisoned to death by the poisonous water." "Humph, how is that possible?" Xian snorted and said contemptuously. "The ancient beast is a part of the profound water palace. The poisonous water is also a part of the ancient formation. It would be a huge joke if the ancient beast was poisoned to death by the water." Chapter 3430. TSK. If they weren't poisoned to death, why don't you tell us why the ancient beast stopped attacking? Xiao Hua smacked his lips as he chuckled at Xian. Xian didn't back down. "I can't see the outside, and I can't release my consciousness either. How would I know? You're the one who controls the innate primordial water, so why don't you tell us why the ancient beast stopped attacking?" "Nonsense. Would I not tell you if I knew?" Xiao Hua scoffed at Xian's argument. "I can't see anything just like you." "Ah, so you can't see either." Xian closed her eyes, almost covering her mouth to hide her laughter. However, after a few chuckles, Xian asked anxiously, "Little monk, is the ancient beast Xianshui gone or not? I'm afraid we don't have enough time." "Benefactress, you're a classic example of someone who values money over life." Xiao Hua couldn't help but laugh. "Even if you want to find someone, you have to protect your own life first." Xian sighed. "The only way out is inside the profound water palace. If we want to save our lives, we have to go inside. As the saying goes, we have to go in whether we're alive or dead." "Damn it, that's right." Xiao Hua was nervous at Xian's grim tone. He waited for another pipe of smoke before secretly opening a crack in the innate primordial water and releasing his soul sense. The ancient beast really is gone. The profound water palace has returned to how it was before. Xiaohua was stunned, but he didn't dare to let his guard down. He expanded his soul sense to scan the area, and then opened up a bigger crack. He peeked through the crack with his naked eye, and when he saw that everything had returned to normal, Xiaohua withdrew the innate primordial water and said in a low voice, "All right, you can open your eyes now." When Xian and the others opened their eyes, they saw that the palace was exactly the same as before. The enormous profound water palace was still in its inverted triangular shape. As for whether or not it was the same as the one they saw before, no one knew. Little monk, Xian bit her lips and whispered, "Thank you." Xiaohua whispered back, "Don't say it now, or I'll be cocky. If the ancient beast sees us, we'll be in trouble." Xian paused, then covered her mouth. Her face was a little red, as if she wanted to laugh but didn't dare. It was difficult to hold it in. Xia Hui looked helplessly at the two. "Xian Yanue, let's talk inside the palace first." Xian covered her mouth and led the way. After walking for several dozen meters, she turned back and whispered, "That profound water ancient beast is right in front of the profound water palace's entrance. Normally, it won't be more than 30 meters away from the entrance. Now that we're here, we can't speak or use any telekinesis. Otherwise, we'll attract the beast's attention." As she spoke, Xian took a look at the golden leaf of Canaan that was stuck to her body. After testing it a little, she felt relieved and tiptoed forward. The ancient beast is at the gate." Xiaohua was stunned. He couldn't help but look below the profound water palace. After all, Xiaohua had already checked the surroundings. He didn't seem to have seen any ancient beast. However, when he deliberately glanced at the bottom of the palace, sure enough, there were two statues that were almost the same color as the palace at the nail-like location. So these are the ancient beasts that attacked the innate primordial water. Xiaohua stared straight at the motionless statues for a moment, thinking in his heart, weren't they abnormally fierce just now? Why are they standing there now? Why do they look like dead statues? That's right. The profound water palace is so huge, and the ancient beasts are so small and motionless. Who knows if they're profound water beasts? At this moment, the profound water beasts really stood there like clay statues. Their eyes, which were as bright as stars, were abnormally dim. There was no light at all. However, Xiaohua and the others only glanced at the beasts. They didn't dare to meet their eyes. They even gradually approached the profound water palace. Looking at the two beasts that looked exactly like the statues in front of the temple, they couldn't help but feel a sense of absurdity. Yes, if they hadn't heard the profound water beasts roar earlier, if they hadn't experienced Xiaohua using his innate primordial water to resist them with his innate primordial water, and if they didn't have the records of profound water beasts in the ink cloud pupil, they would never have thought that these two lifeless statues were real ancient beasts. Suppressing the indescribable fear in his heart, Xiaohua raised his head and looked at the profound water palace that was even more oppressive than a mountain. Under the huge inverted triangle was a pillar that was dozens of meters tall. A pillar that was dozens of meters tall would be considered huge if it were anywhere else. However, under the profound water palace, it seemed so thin and fragile. A chill appeared in the eyes of the others. They were really afraid that the inverted triangle would suddenly fall on them and smash them into meat paste. After a few more meters, the four would be close to the profound water beasts. At the front, Xian couldn't help but stop slightly. The two profound water beasts stood there and looked forward calmly. The distance between them wasn't small, at least dozens of meters. However, in Xian's eyes, this distance was as narrow as the pillar under the profound water palace. An indescribable aura spread out in front of the profound water palace. Perhaps it was the residual power of the profound water beasts, or perhaps it was the formation's restriction after the profound water palace absorbed the energy of heaven and earth. In any case, the aura made it difficult for Xian to breathe. In the face of such a scene, Xian was secretly regretting in her heart. She felt that she had underestimated this ancient formation. However, this regret only lasted for a moment. A wave of stubbornness rose from the bottom of her heart. This place is so dangerous. You actually imprison me here. Since you're so heartless then, I don't need to think anymore. With this thought, Xion's trembling legs became firm. Step by step, she walked past the profound water beasts and arrived in front of the profound water palace's pillar. Fortunately, Xion's actions didn't attract the profound water beast's attention. They remained motionless and didn't even release a trace of their innate spirit. Seeing that Xion didn't attract the profound water beast's attention, Gu Zhen and the others calmed down and followed her to the pillar. This profound water palace is so strange. Xiaohua walked past the Blackwater ancient beast and unconsciously looked back at the Blackwater ancient beast's folded wings and the coiled tail on the ground. He thought to himself, are these the two Blackwater ancient beasts from just now? Why don't I look at them? If they were living things, then I'd be fine with them standing there like statues. But why are their tails coiled up in the same way? That's not possible, is it? Xiaohua probed with his soul sense and carefully scanned the profound water beast's tail on the left a few times. Before Xiaohua could use his soul sense to check out the rest of the profound water beast's tail, Xion stopped again. Xiaohua didn't have time to check the Xianshui ancient beasts. He turned his head and saw Xion raise her hand and take out 4 blue beads from the sleeve of her palace dress. She waved her hand and the 4 beads silently stuck to the pillar. Then Xion looked back at the 2 Xianshui ancient beasts with lingering fear. She opened her mouth and 4 golden streams of Zhen Qi hit the 4 beads at the same time like 4 flying swords. Shua! The 4 pearls simultaneously emitted a blue ripple of brilliance. This brilliance overflowed several times above the pillar, and the pillar also produced a blue brilliance. At the same time, this blue brilliance also swayed along with the brilliance of the pearls, just like layers upon layers of water ripples. When she saw the ripples appear, Xion took a few steps forward and reached her hand into the ripples. Her fair and soft hands sank into the ripples. As Xion lifted her hand, it was as if she had lifted a bead curtain. A gap appeared in the pillar, and Xion walked in without hesitation. Halfway through, Xion even turned back to look at the 3 of them and indicated for them to follow. Xiaohua and the others didn't dare delay. One by one, they lifted their hands and flashed into the gap. Once the 4 of them were inside, the 4 beads remained embedded in the pillar. Ripples of blue light flowed through the beads. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the light slowly dimmed and disappeared. Finally, the beads disappeared into the pillar. There was no longer any movement outside the profound water palace. The 2 profound water beasts stood there for tens of thousands of years. It was as if the entire space had returned to normal. However, this calmness only lasted for a few breaths of time. The beast that Xiaohua had just scanned with his soul sense moved its tail first, trembling slightly. This trembling then spread throughout its entire body. Following that, the beast's 4 hooves moved, the beast's head moved, and finally, its lifeless eyes moved. The Blackwater ancient beast looked around in confusion. It then glanced at the other Blackwater ancient beast on the right that was standing still. After which, it spread its wings and turned into a blue light that flew a few rounds outside the Blackwater Palace. When it did not discover anything, it pushed off the ground and charged into the sky as if it was flat ground. Its body landed on a protruding part of the inverted triangle. The profound water beast opened its mouth and spat out a mouthful of blue light onto the protrusion. With a crack, the protrusion floated into the air. The profound water beast didn't even look back as it charged into the gap below the protrusion. When the profound water beast disappeared, the protrusion fell back down. In a flash of light, the inverted triangle returned to its original state. The profound water beast entered the profound water palace. Xiaohua and the others were unaware of the danger that was about to befall them. Xiaohua stood dumbly in front of the profound water palace's doors as he looked at the scene in front of him. His heart was filled with disbelief. Chapter 34-31. Right in front of Xiaohua's eyes was a transparent triangular palace. Everything inside the palace was made of triangles that looked like colored glass. Even the ground beneath Xiaohua's feet, the top of their heads, and even the palace door behind them were triangles. What was special was that these triangles were exactly the same size. The water blue brilliance flowing along the edges of the triangles also had a similar rhythm. At a glance, it was difficult to distinguish any triangle from any other. At a glance, there were countless strange triangles inside the mysterious water palace. Not only did Xiaohua and the others feel like they were floating in a triangular space, but when their gazes fell on the thousands of transparent mirrors, each mirror reflected the 4 people who had entered the mysterious water palace. The strangest thing was that their gazes could be refracted. In an instant, Xiaohua's gaze seemed to have seen countless mirrors, as if he had seen countless versions of himself. A kind of dizziness arose in Xiaohua's heart. He couldn't help but close his eyes, not daring to look any further. However, even so, the fear that came from looking at each mirror remained in the bottom of his heart. Moreover, in the darkness before him, there were still countless broken mirrors flashing, and in each mirror was a pair of horrified eyes. Damn it, Xiaohua almost blurted out a curse. This mysterious water palace was too deceptive. The shock from walking past the mysterious water ancient beast had yet to subside, and the feeling of being lucky had yet to subside. In an instant, it gave his eyes such a terrifying baptism. Even a cultivator with a firm Tao heart like him couldn't help but feel his heart palpitate. Fellow immortals, Xion's voice trembled. Clearly, she had been caught off guard. As soon as she recovered her wits, she immediately reminded them, "Remember to guard your heart and keep your mind clear." Mo Yintong didn't mention the dangers of the mysterious water palace. She only said that thousands of Dharma images would appear here. If you couldn't find your true form, you wouldn't be able to find your way out. Even I didn't think that this Dharma idol would be so deadly. If we weren't cultivators, we would have lost ourselves just by looking at it. Who knows which one is the real person in the mirror? Xi Hui also didn't dare to raise her head and whispered, "The eyes are the heart, and the soul is born from the heart. Dazzling the eyes is seizing the soul." His gaze wandered as he looked at his feet. Beneath his feet was the same as the surroundings in front of him. There were also many tiny triangles. Xiaohua calmed his mind and slowly raised his eyes. His gaze was not too far away, but it was also rapidly sweeping around. This situation was somewhat similar to the innate primordial water. He already had a similar experience. When he saw that things were not going well, he immediately retracted his gaze. Among the 4 of them, he was the one who suffered the least damage. However, he still sighed with emotion. This primordial magic formation is really powerful. Now that we can't release our Buddha's consciousness, we can only rely on our eyes. Who knows that such simple eyes can also be taken advantage of by the formation? Amitba. Fortunately, I can't release my Buddha's consciousness. Guzhan's Dharma was not as good as Ci Hui's, so it was difficult for him to find himself when he was lost. He was the one who suffered the most damage among the 4. At this moment, he put his palms together and chanted the name of Buddha. If the Buddha's consciousness is released, it will also be lost. It will be harder to find it than the mind. Xion shook her head. Master Guzhan is wrong. The profound water palace's formation was set up for us Confucian cultivators' clear sight arts. Because this place imprisons divine sense and Buddha's consciousness, the Taoist's divine sense cannot leave the body. Only our Confucian clear sight arts can be used. In order to prevent us from finding the true entrance to the profound water palace, the primordial magic formation set up this secret formation here. Oh, so Xion Tanua can use the clear sight arts in front of the profound water palace? Guzhan was slightly taken aback. Xion nodded slightly. This one can use it, but it's not even 10% of my usual power. Xion then looked to the left and smiled bitterly. As for this place, this one wouldn't dare to use it even if I had 10 times the courage. So the palace door where the profound water ancient beast isn't the true entrance to the profound water palace. Xiaohua took a deep breath and said with a smile, "In that case, the triangular maze in front of us is the real entrance?" Xion nodded. "That's right. Only one of these tens of thousands of mirrors is the true entrance to the profound water palace. We must find it from there. Damn it, how is this possible? Xiaohua jumped up and shouted. Not only do we lack Buddhist awareness, we don't even dare to look. How are we supposed to find the entrance? Ahem ahem. Junior brother Tipu, watch your mouth, Xiai Hui hastily coughed and reminded him. Don't let the Buddha blame you. Ba. Senior brother is right. Xiaohua became listless and put his palms together. However, he cursed inwardly. Alas, it's this Xiao's primordial spirit that shaved the Buddha's sarira, not this Xiao's. This Xiao was just casually complaining. Xiai Hui was very satisfied with Xiaohua's reaction. She looked at Xian with a smile and said, since this is recorded in Mo Yuntong, then Xian Tanua must have made preparations? Yes, indeed. Xian nodded. This is the last record of the primordial magic formation in Mo Yuntong. At the same time, it's also the problem this one has been pondering for the longest time. To tell you the truth, fellow Taoist Xiai Hui, this one has racked my brains for 10 years. It was only after meeting you that I suddenly saw the light. Little monk. Xiai Hui was slightly stunned. However, she immediately raised her eyebrows and said with a smile, this little monk understands. Previously, Tanua and this little monk talked about this matter. So it's used here. If it's as Xian Tanua thought, this is indeed the best way to break this maze. However, speaking of this, Xiai Hui frowned again. This little monk doesn't quite understand. How should we cast the spell? Xian glanced at Xiaohua's thoughtful expression, and then at Guzhen's confused face. She smiled bitterly again. This one only knows about the primordial spirit and the Dharma idol. As for how to find the primordial spirit from the Dharma idol, I'm afraid that's something you have to consider. However, in this one's opinion, it's really difficult for you to find the Dharma idol from the thousands of mirrors by yourself. Don't you have Tipu and Master Guzhen now? It should be much easier for you. After hearing Xian's words, Xiaohua understood a little. The so-called primordial spirit was naturally the physical body. There were thousands of triangular mirrors in the maze of the mysterious water palace. Each mirror could reflect the intruder's shadow. However, there was only one real mirror. All the other mirrors were illusions of the maze. It was precisely these mirrors that had the effect of bewitching the mind. The real eye of the formation only played the role of illusions. Since the maze only worked on Confucian cultivators' eye-clearing technique and the naked eye of cultivators, all Buddhist senses, divine thoughts and elemental thoughts could be used. Since the Dharma idol of the Buddhist sect was condensed from karma, it wasn't restricted by the maze. Therefore, the mirror couldn't reflect the Dharma idol's shadow. However, the problem was that even if Xiai Hui or Guzhen released their Dharma idols, how would they find the mirror that could reflect the Dharma idol's shadow? What would they use to check? Thinking of this, Xiaohua's mind raced. He had many methods. He could release the Dharma idol, release the Buddha's sarira, or release his nascent soul. He could deal with all of them. Even the simplest method was to use his soul sense. Perhaps he could find a way out. Of course, Xiaohua could also use the heavenly vision of the Dharma eyes. However, he couldn't be sure if his Dharma eyes could defeat this ancient formation. Although Master Guzhen wasn't proficient in Buddhism, he understood after hearing this. He said loudly, Xiai Hui, if there's anything you need this old monk to do, just tell me. This old monk doesn't understand Buddhism, but I do know some Buddhist divine skills. They can be of help. Xiai Hui thought for a moment and said tentatively, Grandmaster, this disciple doesn't understand the Dharma idol technique. However, the sarira that I cultivate does have the image of a Dharma idol. How about this disciple release the sarira first to see its effect? Grandmaster, why don't you use the Dharma idol technique? I'll listen to you. Guzhen naturally had no objections. Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. He thought to himself, the sarira of a Dharma idol? Isn't this the Buddha's sarira? This monk Xiai Hui really has some background. However, Buddhist light surged around Xiai Hui's body. After a moment, it slowly disappeared. Xiai Hui's expression was somewhat unnatural. She sighed and said, not only does the mysterious water palace confine Buddhist consciousness, but it also confines this little monk's Bodhi Sarira. It seems this little monk can't do anything. Bodhi Sarira. When Guzhan heard Ci Hui's words, he couldn't help but reveal a shocked expression. He cried out involuntarily, Ci Hui, you actually cultivated the Bodhi Sarira? This looking at this grandmaster who couldn't refine karma to form a Sarira, Ci Hui's expression was somewhat uneasy. She smiled and said, all right, grandmaster knows. This disciple was lucky enough to refine the Bodhi Sarira in this life. However, the golden body has yet to form, so I dare not embarrass myself in front of grandmaster. Alas, Ci Hui couldn't hide the disappointment on her face. She sighed and didn't speak again. Xian raised her eyebrows and said with a smile, fellow immortal Ci Hui, I've known you for so long, but this is the first time I've heard you talk about refining the Bodhi Sarira. This is second only to the Buddha's Sarira in your Buddhist sect. With this Sarira, not only will you be able to attain the golden body of a bodhisattva in this life, but you'll also be able to attain the supreme golden body in the future. Ci Hui hurriedly put her palms together and humbly recited the name of Buddha. She said, Umitba, this is the karma of this little monk's several lifetimes of cultivation. There's nothing to show off. Perhaps this little monk was like Grandmaster Guzhan in the past, specializing in the lineage of Dharma protectors. Later on, this little monk obtained an opportunity and gained the favor of Buddha. Today, I can finally fulfill my wish. Xian looked so excited that she almost forgot that she was in the mysterious water palace. She cupped her hands and said, fellow immortal, you're too humble. Being able to refine the Bodhi Sarira isn't something that can be exchanged with several lifetimes of cultivation. If it weren't for the profound Dharma and profound opportunities, how could it be possible? I didn't expect this little girl to be acquainted with a bodhisattva of the Buddhist sect. It's truly fortunate. Chapter 34-32. Ahem. Before Xian could finish, Ci Hui coughed twice and even winked at her, interrupting her. Xian Tanua, no matter what kind of relic it is, it can't be used in the profound water palace. What's the use of that? It's not as useful as Ancestor Guzhan's golden Buddha statue. That's true. Xian suddenly came to her senses. Her eyes narrowed and she almost covered her mouth with her hand. She hurriedly covered it up. Everyone has their shortcomings and strengths. That's right. To the side, Xiaohua frowned. He knew that if Ci Hui's Bodhi relic couldn't be used, then his Buddha relic wouldn't be able to leave his body. Since his relic couldn't leave his body, then his nascent soul couldn't either. Perhaps he could only use his soul sense and heavenly law embodiment technique. Thinking of this, Xiaohua was about to quietly release his soul awareness. Roar! Guzhan roared and clenched his fists. Buddha light flashed all over his body. Guzhan's originally tall body grew bigger and bigger. In a moment, a Buddha statue of several zhang tall slowly appeared, majestic and awe-inspiring. Clang, clang, clang. Just as Ancestor Guzhan's golden Buddha statue appeared, countless sounds came from the profound water palace's mirrors. When Xiaohua looked up, he saw that many of the previously dazzling mirrors had turned into black holes. The sounds came from the shattering of the illusionary mirrors. A golden Buddha statue can restrain an ancient formation? Xiaohua was aghast. However, before he could shift his gaze away, the familiar rumbling of magical treasures resounded. Rays of aqua-blue light appeared once again. Xiaohua hurriedly shifted his gaze away. Immediately, waves of strange magical energy fluctuations spread throughout the entire mysterious water palace. This magical energy was like a whirlwind, but also like a scorching heat. Guzhan's newly formed golden Buddha statue actually showed signs of melting under this magical energy. Strands of golden sweat seeped out of the golden Buddha statue. A trace of pain appeared on Guzhan's face, which was flashing with Buddhist light. He cried out, "The mystic water palace's formation is too powerful. I can't hold on for too long. Hurry up and find the entrance." "Yes," Ci Hui gritted her teeth and hurriedly replied. She then waved her hand and said, "Tipu, look over here. Xian Tanyu, look over there, okay." Xian didn't dare to be negligent. She quickly turned around and looked in the direction Ci Hui was pointing at. Xiaohua also did the same. However, Xiaohua didn't use his eyes, but his soul sense. Xian's idea was very ideal. But reality once again showed the crux of the matter. The naked eye couldn't look directly at the illusory mirrors. Even if they could just glance at them now, Xian and Cihui didn't dare to be too careless, for fear that they would miss the mirror with the Transcendence golden body. However, it was extremely difficult to find a mirror with an image among the thousands of mirrors. Cihui and Xian's eyes seemed to be dazzled. Heavy dizziness and discomfort rose from the bottom of their hearts. There were several times when they almost got lost in the mirror. Compared to them, Xiaohua was in a better state. Although soul sense wasn't as useful as Xiaohua thought, being able to see through the illusion of the array and see through the array's core with a glance, soul sense wouldn't be reflected by the illusory mirrors, so there was no danger of losing one's mind. However, Xiaohua was the same as Xian and the others. He also didn't dare to be careless. He also checked the mirrors one by one. As time passed, the magic power fluctuations became more rapid. Xiaohua could clearly feel the heat in the surrounding air. He looked again and saw that the surface of Master Guzhen's golden body had already melted. Just like Xiaohua's Buddha Sarira, it had turned into golden liquid and flowed down the golden body. When it dripped to where Guzhen was standing, it immediately turned into small golden Buddhist lotuses. Guzhen's golden body of Buddha is different from Frost Bamboo's great strength Vajra Dharma body. It seems to be transformed from his main body, similar to my heavenly law's embodiment of heaven and earth. As Xiaohua continued probing, he thought to himself, although this Buddhist divine power is a level higher than Frost Bamboo's, the Dharma array has melted his golden body. That means his body will also be damaged. Why don't I use heavenly form to replace it? Thinking up to this point, Xiaohua couldn't help but laugh. No matter what, Great Master Guzhen is a Buddhist sect guardian with 5th grade origin energy. Wouldn't his golden Buddha avatar be more profound than my heavenly law's embodiment technique? Instead of thinking too much, why don't I hurry up and find the entrance? If Master Guzhen can't support me at the final critical moment, it won't be too late for me to make such a plan. Roar. After a while, Master Guzhen's originally straight waist twisted slightly. A slightly hoarse roar came from his mouth. It was unknown whether it was a painful or angry roar. His movement didn't matter. Pa pa pa. Several loud pops sounded. Several thumb-sized bubbles appeared on his limbs. Then with several explosions, these bubbles all exploded. Golden liquid splashed out. Before it could fall, it had already bloomed into lotus shapes in the air. The main body is the Sarira, and the Sarira is also the main body. Xiaohua sighed. He understood the meaning of Buddhist guardians. But suddenly, Xiaohua was startled again. My Sarira is in the shape of a Buddha. It seems to be able to form its own body. If a Buddha's Sarira leaves the main body to cultivate on its own, wouldn't it only be able to walk the path of a guardian? Xiaohua was startled. His soul consciousness was a little scattered, and he couldn't tell where he was looking. Xiaohua hurriedly composed himself and grumbled in his heart. Although my Buddhist cultivation is at 5th grade essence power, and according to the records of the Buddhist scriptures an exquisite temple, I can be considered to have reached the lotus realm. But in reality, I know very little about Buddhism, and Buddhist magical powers are few and far between. Doesn't Cihui also have a Bodhi Sarira? He's not in a hurry, so why should I? Isn't this the entrance to the formation? People often say that one can wear out iron shoes in fruitless search, but by chance, one will find it without any effort. Xiaohua was like that at this moment. He was focused on searching for the entrance, but he didn't find anything. But in a moment of absent-mindedness, his soul consciousness scattered, and he actually found a triangular mirror. On this mirror, other than Xiaohua, Cihui, and Xian, there was also Grandmaster Guzhen's golden Buddha statue that was much taller than the others. This golden Buddha statue was only much taller than Guzhen's main body on the other mirrors, and there wasn't the slightest trace of Buddhist light on it. It's here. Xiaohua was overjoyed. He hurriedly pointed at the mirror below him and shouted. But what made Xiaohua extremely surprised was that at this moment, Xian and Cihui also shouted in unison. It's here. However, the two of them pointed in different directions. Xiai Hui pointed in the sky, and Xian pointed in the same direction as Xiaohua. Ah! Xiaohua was rather surprised. He didn't think that the two's eyes could be as fast as his soul consciousness. He subconsciously looked in the direction Xiai Hui was pointing at. Sure enough, on the same triangular mirror above everyone's heads, Grandmaster Gu Zhen's golden Buddha statue was also reflected. Just as Xiaohua thought, Xiai Hui and Xian also looked at each other's mirrors. The three of them then looked at each other with confusion in their eyes. They didn't think that the profound water palace would have two entrances. Little monk, you're really amazing. Xian looked at Xiaohua again and said curiously, the area that immortal Xiai Hui assigned to you doesn't seem to be here. Xiaohua rubbed his nose and said honestly, when I saw Grandmaster Gu Zhen's golden body melt, this little monk couldn't bear to see it. In a moment of absent-mindedness, I looked down below. Grandmaster Gu Zhen's sacrifice moved Buddha, and allowed this little monk to see the entrance to the formation. Oh, Grandmaster Gu Zhen, you can take back your avatar now. Fu Gu Zhen let out a long sigh. The Buddhist light around him quickly disappeared, and then shrank like a bubble. His golden body also shrank rapidly and returned to its original form. However, Grandmaster Gu Zhen's face was pale. Not only was his body trembling, but his arms and legs were also trembling. He looked like an old man who had just recovered from a serious illness. Grandmaster, you've worked hard. Xiai Hui hurried forward to support him. Gu Zhen shook his arms and wanted to break free, but he seemed to be powerless and could only let Xiai Hui do as she pleased. Xiaohua ignored Xian's reproach. He raised his head and glanced at the mirror Xiai Hui pointed at, and then at the mirror he discovered beneath his feet. He asked with a wry smile, Xian, this mysterious water palace actually has two entrances. Is there any record of this in your Mayan eyes? No, Xian answered without hesitation. Then which entrance should we use? Xiai Hui asked from the side. Xian thought for a moment, then clapped her hands and took out two jade boxes. She said, although we found the entrance to the profound water palace, we still need to use the Dao Gate to enter the real profound water palace. These are the two talismans I found according to Mo Yuntong's records. These two talismans are exactly the same. I prepared them in case of an emergency. Now that there are two entrances, it is destined that both entrances will be opened. I think it's better to open the entrance first. I'll wait and see, then decide which entrance to enter. Ah, I'm afraid that's the only way. Xiai Hui frowned. Faced with such a difficult problem, she had no choice but to agree. Xian raised her hand and one of the jade boxes opened. A bright cyan halo rushed out of the jade box. Before Xian could cast a spell, a thumb-sized seed jumped out of the jade box. Xiaohua looked at the jade box expectantly. He wanted to know what kind of rare talisman Xian had taken out, but he was still shocked when he saw the seed jump out. Looking at the seed again, it leaped into the air and flickered with an emerald green halo. The halo slowly unfolded, and the seed also unfolded along with the halo. Xiaohua could clearly see that it was a talisman in the shape of a leaf. The wrinkles on the talisman and the texture of the leaf were clearly visible. Xiaohua didn't need to use his divine sense to know that it was a rare talisman from ancient times. Chapter 34-33. Sure enough, Xian promptly explained. This is a Taoist wood spirit talisman. It's said that it specializes in breaking water-type formations. The specific refining method has long been lost, and these two talismans were found after spending more than 10 years of painstaking effort. They're also the last preparations I've made before entering the formation. I don't know what I'll encounter after entering the profound water palace. Xian opened her mouth again, and was about to blow out true energy when she suddenly closed it again. She glanced at Xiaohua and said, Little monk, can you help me next time? Oh, how can I help you? Xiaohua was somewhat puzzled. I don't know any Taoist magic, so how can I help you? Of course, if you can teach me how to use Buddhist telekinesis to activate talismans, I'd be more than happy to. Hehe, you wish. Xian glanced at Xiaohua. The telekinesis you use is completely different from Taoist magic. I'm a Confucian cultivator, so how can I know this kind of secret technique? If you want this secret technique, you might as well ask your senior martial brother, who will definitely become a bodhisattva in this lifetime. After speaking, Xian opened her mouth and a golden true energy shot out like a sword and hit the leaf talisman. The moment the true energy came into contact with the talisman, it immediately produced a corrosive sound. Following this sound, the emerald green brilliance on the leaf flickered rapidly, as if the leaf was being devoured by insects. Xian saw that the talisman's brilliance was faintly flickering. She hurriedly pointed at the talisman. The leaf, like a falling leaf on an autumn night, fell towards the mirror surface that Xiaohua and Xian had identified at the same time. From afar, the mirror surface looked extremely small, but the leaf that fell on it was insignificant. However, as soon as the leaf-like talisman touched the mirror surface, a water-blue brilliance flashed and submerged the entire talisman in an instant. The emerald green brilliance completely disappeared. However, in just a few breaths, a wisp of emerald green brilliance emerged from the water-blue brilliance like a sharp sword. Moreover, as soon as this light appeared, it immediately swayed and expanded. Strands of water-based heaven and earth spirit chi flashed with blue light and flowed into the emerald green light. Within this emerald green light, a vine-like branch stretched out wood counters water. Although the wood spirit talisman can't absorb wood-type spiritual energy from the profound water palace, the water-type spiritual energy can still make the wood spirit talisman work. It seems, it's only a matter of time before the profound water palace is destroyed. When Xiaohua saw this situation, he immediately understood in his heart. However, the real situation had exceeded his expectations. In the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the wood spirit talisman had already transformed into vines that completely covered the triangular mirror. When Xian grabbed it with her hand, the vines contracted and instantly shattered the mirror. Behind the mirror, a blue tunnel was revealed. His Xiaohua's eyes looked at the blue passage, and a feeling emerged from the bottom of his heart. It was as if there was a call coming from the passage with the wind. Xiaohua couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. He didn't know what this feeling meant. However, no matter what this feeling meant, there was one thing he was certain of. This entrance was definitely the real entrance. Xiaohua was certain of this. However, Xiaohua only glanced at it and didn't say anything. He quietly waited for Xian to attack again and shatter the other mirror above everyone's heads. Seeing the mirror shatter, before Xian could say anything, Cai Hui's face revealed a look of astonishment. She asked curiously, What does this mean? Why did this little monk feel a call? There seems to be a voice coming from inside. Could it be that this entrance is the real entrance? Damn, how is this possible? How can Cai Hui feel the same as me? Xiaohua frowned as he looked at the passage that also flashed with blue light. His heart rippled. If one of the passages produced a call, then it would be fine. There must be something attracting this Xiao. However, the two passages produced two different calls. The biggest possibility is, there's something fishy about the profound water palace. Little monk, what about you? Xian didn't answer Cai Hui's question. Instead, she looked at Xiaohua with eyes full of interest. Xiaohua shook his head slightly. This little monk didn't feel the call from the passage. Moreover, contrary to senior brother Cai Hui, this little monk has a subtle feeling about the other entrance. What about Grandmaster Guzhen? Xian turned to Guzhen. Guzhen's face revealed hesitation. After pondering for a moment, he said, This old monk's thoughts are similar to Cai Hui's. The entrance above us should be real. After all, this is the lowest level of the profound water palace. If there is an entrance, it must be facing upwards. Xian's expression turned grave. She glanced at Xiaohua and said, Although the profound water palace is above us, the entrance might not be. This little monk's feelings are similar to yours. I feel that the entrance below us is real. Cai Hui's expression changed. She said anxiously, This is bad. Could this be the profound water palace's trick? The purpose of this formation is to separate the four of us? Anything is possible. Xian nodded. We only have 3 choices. Either all 4 of us go up, all 4 of us go down. Or we split into 2 groups and go our own way. This Xia Hui was truly hesitant. However, she still insisted. This little monk feels that it's better to go up. This little monk feels that it's better to go down. Xiaohua originally wanted to go up like Xia Hui, but he was somewhat unwilling. His perception had always been accurate. Today there was no reason for it to be wrong. Thus he also insisted. This little one has heard that formations that have been set up for a long time will give birth to a formation spirit. Could it be that this ancient formation has already gained sentience? Xian laughed. I don't think that's likely to be strange. However, this little one feels that these 2 entrances might be different methods leading to the same result. Although the paths inside are different, they will eventually converge at the same place. Yes. As the saying goes, infinite scenery lies at the peak of a dangerous mountain. These 2 different directions might be a kind of fate and opportunity for us. Guzhen said. No matter what you choose, this old monk has decided to go through the entrance above us. With that, Guzhen flung his hand, wanting to shake off Xia Hui who was supporting him. However, Xia Hui didn't pull her hand away. She just smiled and said, since Grandmaster has made his choice and this entrance was found by this disciple, it's naturally impossible for us to not go through this entrance. This disciple is willing to go with Grandmaster and help Grandmaster search for the ancient Buddha. Fine. Xian glanced at Xiaohua and nodded. Since this little monk found the same entrance as us, this little one will go through the entrance below with you. With that, Xian winked at Xiaohua and said with a smile, Little monk, you have to protect me. Of course. Xiaohua smiled. This little monk was most protective of women before he entered the Buddhist sect. Xia Hui's throat wasn't good again. Once the assignment was completed, Xia Hui supported Guzhen, and the 2 of them slowly flew towards the entrance above the 4 people's heads. Looking at the backs of the 2 people, and then looking at Guzhen's tall figure, Xiaohua suddenly thought of the frost bamboo. Naturally, he also thought of the Buddhist protector's unruly way of swallowing relics. Therefore, he immediately opened his mouth and transmitted a few words to Xia Hui. Xia Hui did not seem to have heard him. Not only did she not reply, she did not even slow down in the slightest. The 2 monks, one tall and one short, slowly flew towards the entrance of the blue brilliance in the mountain cave. When the 2 people's figures disappeared, the brilliance flickered slightly and a flat mirror surface appeared there. Now even if Xiaohua and Xian wanted to follow Xia Hui, it was too late. Little monk, let's go. We'll go in too. Don't worry about Xia Hui. Grandmaster Guzhen isn't as despicable as you think. Xian waved her hand and landed first. How could Xiaohua dare to be negligent? He hurriedly flew down with Xian, and said with a flattering smile, The ancients said that one shouldn't have the heart to harm others, but one must guard against others. It's normal for this little monk to be worried about senior martial brother Xia Hui, who asked Grandmaster Guzhen to be a Buddhist Dharma protector. Xian smacked her lips as she flew and said mockingly, Which ancient person are you talking about? Why do I often hear people talking about this? Moreover, why do I feel that you, a Buddhist disciple, are even more wary of Buddhists than me? Is that so? Xiaohua rubbed his bald head and said with a smile, That's because you're not a bhikkhuni of my Buddhist Dharma protector, and don't know the details of my Buddhist Dharma protector. That's why you're not on guard. What are you on guard against? Xian probed again. Previously, you said that you came to the profound water palace to protect fellow Taoist Xia Hui. At that time, I only thought that you were talking nonsense. But now, it seems that your Buddhist Dharma protector's cultivation is far superior to Xia Hui's. How come I've never heard of such a good-looking, talented, and virtuous little monk like you? Alas, it's hard to give up on one's natural beauty. I've been raised in a boudoir and no one knows me. Xiaohua very regretfully rubbed his bald head and replied, This little monk has always emphasized on keeping a low profile. I didn't dare to shave my head and become a monk because I was afraid of attracting attention. New Tanyua thought about it. This little monk had just shaved my head and brought you all here. In the blink of an eye, I met a senior martial brother who will definitely attain enlightenment in this lifetime. Since senior martial brother Ci Hui has such a background, New Tanua presumably also has a family background. Only, I wonder which family does New Tanua come from in the hidden immortal continent? Do you want to know? Xian flew to the light blue entrance and turned around. Yes, Xiaohua hurried over and nodded his bald head like a chick pecking rice. I just won't tell you. Xian sneered and rushed into the entrance. Don't tell me if you want to. Xiaohua also muttered and followed closely behind. The passage was several zhang tall. As the two flew in one after another, the brilliance of the entire passage actually began to revolve. It was just like the whirlpools that appeared on the four walls of the profound water palace earlier. Wave after wave of blue brilliance drew an arc in front of Xiaohua. At first it was slow, but then it gradually sped up and rushed forward. Looking behind the two, the place where the blue light surged had already sealed the entrance. There were no longer any gaps. Chapter 34-34. Xian was on high alert. As soon as she entered the entrance, she took out her flexible sword without waiting for the light to change. With a slight twist of her wrist, the blade coiled around her right arm like a spirit snake. Clear chi gushed out from between Xian's eyebrows. Her limpid eyes flickered like the light in the passageway, but the golden light in her eyes only flashed for a moment. Alas, Xian sighed. She knew that she still couldn't use her eye-clearing technique. Her five senses were similar to those of ordinary people in the mysterious water palace. Just as Xian was sighing, she suddenly felt a heavy weight on her shoulders. Startled, she hastily looked up and saw that the blue light in the passageway was gradually stabilizing, and its color was getting denser. What's going on? Xian frowned. Her flying figure slowed down, and she turned to ask in a low voice, "Little monk, do you feel something strange?" Xiaohua was right behind Xian. Seeing her slow down, he understood what she was thinking. He hastily flew to her side and stood shoulder to shoulder with her. He answered, "This little monk feels a little heavy on my body. It seems to be the mysterious water palace's restriction again." Alas, that's what happened. Xian sighed again. After all, it's an ancient array with layer upon layer of strange restrictions. Without strength, it's really difficult to move even an inch. Xiaohua hesitated for a moment, then advised, "Actually, this little monk still has to persuade Lady Benefactor. Right now, our main goal is to find a way out. This mysterious water palace is really not a place where people with our cultivation can enter. Even if you want to find someone, you should first consider your own life, right? Without your life, what can you do?" "A way out." Xian shrugged. "It's in this mountain deep in the clouds." "What?" Xiaohua's expression suddenly changed. As if he had thought of something, he hastily cried out, "Could it be you don't know where the exit is?" Or, at this point, Xiaohua really didn't want to ask any more questions. Xian had said that she had the ink cloud pupil. Xiaohua had assumed that since someone had left the ink cloud pupil behind, someone must have left behind information about this ancient formation after escaping. He had followed Xian into the profound water palace. Even if he couldn't see an immortal artifact, he would at least be able to escape unscathed. However, he really didn't expect that the ink cloud pupil in Xian's possession didn't contain any records of this. Xiaohua had been relying on Mo Yuntong and this exit to enter the profound water palace, when he had broken through this ancient magic array. Now that Xian didn't know what to say, how could she not be scared witless? This was an ancient array. The previous few checkpoints had already shown how ferocious this array was. And that was only the outer perimeter of the profound water palace. Now that he had truly entered the profound water palace, the passageway once again gave off a heavy feeling. Who knew what he was about to encounter? He had originally thought that he would be able to find a way out if he braced himself and forced himself through this passageway. Who knew? Xiaohua couldn't help but want to cry. Before Xiaohua's tears could fall, the heavy feeling on his body increased again. Xiaohua glanced at Xian. This strange woman was flying with her head held high, looking like a dead pig that wasn't afraid of boiling water. He didn't bother to say anything more. His head drooped as he flew forward with Xion. At this point, he had already made up his mind. Self-preservation was self-preservation. Apart from self-preservation, he didn't care about anything else. Immortal artifacts, prisoners, nothing. He didn't believe that with his divine abilities, he couldn't protect himself. The pressure on his body increased even more. In half the time it took to brew a cup of tea, Xiaohua and Xion had only flown a few dozen meters. Although there was nothing tangible in the passageway, Xiaohua felt that the entire passageway was like a quagmire. He was currently wading through the water. The quagmire that was difficult to walk through was definitely not too far away. Sure enough, as Xiaohua expected, the blue brilliance suddenly changed when it reached the depths of the passageway. Strands of blue blossomed from the deep blue, as if the blue had surpassed the blue. They rapidly rotated within the blue passageway, similar to the blue light that appeared when Xiaohua had just entered the passageway. Oh no! Feeling the heavy pressure on his body increase again, Xiaohua came to his senses and shouted, Xion, hurry up and leave! The pressure in this passageway is increasing layer by layer. In the end, it will crush our bodies into minced meat. As he spoke, Xiaohua no longer dared to conceal his cultivation. He activated his transcendence energy and displayed the wind escape technique, rushing towards the front of the passageway. Who would have thought that it would be fine if Xiaohua didn't activate his transcendence energy? But the moment he displayed the wind escape technique, an enormous force crashed into Xiaohua's body along with his transcendence energy. Caught off guard, Xiaohua's entire body fell with a whoosh sound, directly reaching half of Xion's waist. This Xiaohua's body sank. His eyes narrowed slightly as he looked at the passageway in the distance. He understood in his heart that this was the Dao Sect's formation. The method to restrict the Dao Sect's disciples was naturally easy to use. At this moment, he had to either give up on using the Dao Sect's divine ability or forcefully rely on the Dao Sect's divine ability to charge out. Otherwise, he could only continue to use the Buddhist sect's divine ability and deal with the myriad of changes by remaining unchanged. Xion naturally also felt the pressure increase. However, before she could activate the auspicious cloud, Xiaohua suddenly fell down. At this moment, she also looked at Xiaohua strangely. Let's go. Xiaohua didn't explain in detail. He activated the auspicious cloud and rushed forward while rising up again. However, after flying for the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the azure brilliance deepened once more, and the pressure doubled once more. Not only did Xiaohua not reach the same height as before, he even became half a foot shorter than before. Naturally, Xion's expression changed greatly, and she also fell down like Xiaohua. Little monk, I'm afraid we can't touch the brilliance of this passageway. Xion shouted. Although Mo Yuntong no longer has any records, since it's a passageway, we must pass through. This brilliance must be restricted by the profound water palace. If we touch it, we'll definitely suffer. Not necessarily. What if we're sent out of the profound water palace as soon as we touch it? Xiaohua coldly snorted and retorted sarcastically. Xion glanced at him and said indifferently, Why don't you give it a try? I'm not giving it a try. Xiaohua shook his head and suddenly asked, Right benefactress, do you know Xiaohua originally wanted to ask Xion if she knew Princess Baihua of the Cha Nu country, Xione, but before he could say anything, he remembered that he was now the little monk Tipu of the Western Paradise. How could he know a woman from the hidden immortal continent? He immediately shut his mouth. Who do I know? Xion saw that Xiaohua didn't say anything and continued to ask. Forget it, let's not talk about it. Let's talk about it after we get out alive. Xiaohua waved his hand. At this moment, it was difficult for him to move his hand. Even his arm felt somewhat sore and numb. Xion narrowed her eyes and said, You're not going to say it? Are you afraid I'll see through your intentions? If you have the ability, you can see through it even if I don't say it. Xiaohua argued. Do you think Xion couldn't help but get angry? Just as she was about to say something, buzz the whole passage flashed with a blue brilliance. Rings of light chased after Xiaohua and the others from behind and rushed forward. The speed of the rings of light was different. Each ring was faster than the previous one. The heavy pressure on Xiaohua and Xian's body was like a wave, each layer stronger than the previous one. Hurry, Xiaohua urged again, but at this time, the two of them were already doing their best, but the passage still seemed to be endless. Boom! When the blue rings of light chased after them, the whole passage shook, and the color immediately turned green. Along with the change in brilliance, bang 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 sounds came from Xiaohua's body. It was the sound of the joints all over his body. Xiaohua's eyes flashed with shock. He had already discovered the pattern. When the blue brilliance disappeared, the pressure in the passage should be twice as heavy as before. Now that the blue brilliance disappeared again, the pressure should be twice as heavy as before. If he counted, it should be 4 times as heavy as before. Xiaohua didn't know whether this passage was similar to his bone tempering, which required the bone tempering of 7 colors. However, even if it was the 5 elements technique, in the end the pressure was still 32 times as heavy as when he first entered the passage. Of course, this was only Xiaohua's estimation. This was a restriction used to imprison cultivators, so how could it only be 2 or 4 times as heavy? When Xiaohua had just entered the passageway, the pressure from the flickering blue brilliance was already several times that of the outside of the passageway. And then the cyan brilliance was several times stronger. In the end, the pressure was several hundred times or even several thousand times stronger. How could a cultivator withstand this pressure? Xiaohua slightly bit his lips, and Buddhist light flashed around his body. He hurriedly released his soul consciousness and thought to himself, the only thing I can do now is to resist this pressure. This Xiao's body and bones have been tempered, so I should be able to resist for a while. I just don't know if Xian will be able to escape this calamity. Thinking up to here, Xiaohua's face suddenly showed joy and he shouted, Xian, the exit is about 900 feet ahead. We just need to rush to the exit. Xian looked at Xiaohua from head to toe, and the panic on her face was not as bad as before. She seemed to have thought of a countermeasure, but she didn't ask Xiaohua how he knew the exit was 900 feet ahead. She only faintly replied, I know. She once again sped up. While the two of them were talking about hope, the restriction inside the passage seemed to know. The green brilliance flickered even faster, and the pressure became even more violent. One moment it was down, the next moment it was up, and then left and right. Xiaohua and Xian became even more exhausted and couldn't afford to be distracted and increased their speed. Seeing the green brilliance become even denser, Xiaohua's body began to feel strangely sore and swollen. Xiaohua understood that this time, the pressure was already several dozen times heavier than before, and his body was afraid that he was about to reach his limit. However, when he glanced at Xian, he saw that she was actually having it easier than him. Strands of golden mist had already appeared on her palace dress, and this mist protected Xian's protruding body. The mist had already condensed into armor inscriptions, making it look like a close-fitting golden armor. Chapter 34-35. Xian's golden armor was not only solidified on the surface, but it was also overflowing with golden mist from time to time. The golden armor had already been compressed into a thin layer, and was no longer as thick as before. It was obvious that the golden armor had reached its limit. The situation had already begun to become critical, and Xiaohua could clearly feel that the auspicious cloud beneath his feet had also slowed down. The passage now seemed to be filled with silt. Not only were his hands and feet buried, even the karma of the Buddha's Sarira and the true energy in his dantian were wrapped up, making it difficult for him to use them. The green brilliance is already like this. What should we do in the future? Xiaohua's mouth was clearly bitter, and he somewhat disappointedly shifted his gaze away from Xian. He first looked at the end of the passage, and then looked again at the dense crystal-like green passage. Boom! Just as Xiaohua's gaze fell on the passage, the entire passage violently shook, and dense cracks appeared in the crystal-like green light. Good! Xiaohua almost blurted out in praise. Quick, this passage is changing, I'm afraid it's our chance. As he spoke, Xiaohua hurriedly released his soul consciousness, trying to find a flaw in the passage. Unfortunately, the tunnel shook violently for a few times before calming down. The densely packed cracks rapidly widened. However, a bright yellow color blossomed from within the cracks. It was as dazzling as the yellow flowers in the morning sun. "This is bad," Xiaohua hastily shouted again, and did not have the time to be embarrassed because of his misjudgment. Before Xian's strange gaze could shift away from Xiaohua, a heavy pressure more than 10 times stronger than before suddenly appeared, as if a large hand had suddenly clenched. This heavy pressure was different from before, and it came from all sides of the passage, heading straight for the center. Although Xiaohua and Xian did not have to worry about being swept down the passage, the strength of this heavy pressure suddenly increased, and the two suddenly stopped in midair, unable to fly at all. Pa pa pa, a series of sounds rang out like beans being fried. The golden armor on Xian's body was first broken into pieces, then the broken pieces exploded inch by inch. The tens of thousands of inscriptions on the armor whimpered and turned into strokes, disappearing into the yellow light. Xian screamed. Her palace dress, which was originally fluttering in the wind, stuck to her body. Although it didn't reveal anything, the curves of her body were exposed. Even when Xian opened her mouth, not only did she spit out Jin Qi, but even Jun Qi gushed out from her body. It was too late. Xian's body shrank, and then her face turned dark red. Xiaohua was naturally much calmer than Xian. However, he also found it difficult to maintain his composure under this heavy pressure. His skin, which was originally as tough as steel, was collapsing time and time again. It was as if the entire profound water palace was pressing down on him. A sense of déjà vu arose in his heart. That's right. Xiaohua had once encountered such a heavy formation restriction in the Dawn Rain continent. However, at that time, the formation restriction wasn't as heavy as it was now. Moreover, Xiaohua had the Phoenix Dharma body at that time. Xiaohua relied on the Dharma body to break the formation restriction. At this time, not only was the formation 100 times stronger than before, but Xiaohua's Phoenix celestial body had also disappeared. In particular, in this passage, all Daoist spells were restrained. Although Xiaohua still hadn't released his magic treasure, he believed that magic treasures could only be ordinary weapons in this space. However, Xiaohua still didn't give up. He sensed the piercing pain on his skin, and knew that his body was beginning to tear. He hurriedly raised his hand slightly. Even this small action expended a great deal of Xiaohua's strength. "Out!" Xiaohua softly shouted, and the seal of overturning the sea flew out of the space. Xiaohua formed a seal in his hand, and his Jun Qi, which should have been surging like a tide, was now compressed into a trickle. When his magic power rushed into the air, it had already mostly disappeared. When it landed on the seal of overturning the sea, the brilliance on the seal of overturning the sea flickered. Where was its previous majestic appearance? Seeing the seal of overturning the sea in such a state, Xiaohua completely gave up. He raised his hand and withdrew the seal of overturning the sea. Xian, who was beside him, was in a state of panic. Not only was her face flushed red, but her skin, which was not covered by her palace dress, had turned from snow white to golden yellow. Now there were patches of blood stains on her skin. It was obvious that she had suffered serious injuries. However, she still keenly saw Xiaohua's seal of overturning the sea, as well as the traces of Daoist magic power in it. Xian turned pale with fright. She was even more surprised than when she encountered the heavy pressure in the passage that she had never encountered before. However, she was even more shocked when Xiaohua raised his hand again. 7 flying swords with different sword lights appeared with Xiaohua's hand gesture. Xiaohua opened his mouth and a mouthful of Jun Qi rushed into the air. Then he formed a seal with his hand. Although the 7 flying swords were very difficult, they still turned into rainbows and pierced toward Xian thief. Although Xian was somewhat on guard, she never would have thought that Xiaohua would disregard his own safety and suddenly attack her in such a dangerous place. Xian unconsciously clenched her teeth and cursed, "Damn little bald donkey." Following Xian's curses, her hand also reached out, wanting to take something out of her bosom. However, it was already too late for her to fight back. The 7 flying swords had already rushed to about 10 feet away from her. However, just when Xian was feeling discouraged, the 7 Zhenqi from the 7 flying swords actually condensed in the air and surrounded Xian. Although the sword light was as thin as a cicada's wing, and even flashed under the heavy pressure, it seemed that it would not be able to last long. However, Xian's body felt lighter, as if she had unloaded a heavy burden. He's protecting me. Xian suddenly came to a realization. I've wronged him. Xian instantly felt her chi and blood surging up. She did not know whether it was because of shame or the sudden release of Zhenqi, but her face turned blood red. Did he hear me scold him just now? Xian's heart unexpectedly gave birth to a very inappropriate question at this time. However, before Xian could look at Xiaohua with doubt, another thought emerged like weeds. The little monk is a Buddhist disciple. How could he know the flying swords of our Confucian cultivators? Humph, it must be. That trace of feeling instantly turned into anger. She even glared at Xiaohua with somewhat fiery eyes. Not only did she not take her hand out of her bosom, she even treated the 7-star sword formation as if it was nothing. When Xian saw Xiaohua, her eyes unconsciously gave birth to extraordinary splendor. Xiaohua roared loudly, his body overflowing with Buddhist light or golden light. His originally thin and tall figure slowly expanded. The heavenly law embodiment technique, that was comparable to the golden body of Guzhen's Buddha, was finally displayed. Sure enough, as Xiaohua thought, this heavenly law embodiment technique was refined by the primordial spirit. It was different from the Tao sex magic, and was very different from the phoenix celestial body. However, it was similar to the golden body of Guzhen's Buddha. In this passage of the ancient formation, it still had the power to fight. This guy is actually a Buddhist disciple of the Buddhist sect? Or a martial master of my Confucian cultivation? Xian was somewhat flabbergasted. However, now was not the time for her to ponder. Xiaohua's Dharma embodiment, which was several zhang long, immediately streaked his several zhang long arm through the air. That large hand even pierced into the 7-star sword formation. Although it sounded loud and clear, under this heavy pressure, its tone had already changed. He shouted, Xian, I'll send you out first. You, what are you doing? Seeing Xiaohua's large hand grabbing towards her. Although that large hand flashed with golden light, Xian actually panicked. She hastily withdrew her hand from her bosom. Without hesitation, she pulled out the golden hairpin she gave to Guzhen before and stabbed it towards Xiaohua's large hand. Just as the golden hairpin was taken out, a wave of cold air emerged from the bottom of Xiaohua's heart. His large hand stopped in midair as he hurriedly said, Female benefactor, the heavy pressure is still increasing. This golden body of Buddha is this little monk's last resort. This little monk wants to try sending you out of the passage. If you're unwilling, this little monk will leave by himself. This Xian looked at Kuko in the distance. She fiercely clenched her teeth and said, Fine. But don't you have any bad intentions? Hearing this, Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He grabbed his hand again and called out, What bad intentions can this little monk have? Female benefactor, don't you know that form is emptiness and emptiness is form? While speaking, Xiaohua's large hand was about to grab Xian. He ordered, Female benefactor, use your flying technique with all your strength. If you have any secret techniques, don't hesitate to use them. Success or failure, life or death will depend on this. Before he finished speaking, Xiaohua shouted, Go! Then, with a swing of his hand, he threw Xian and the 7-star sword formation to the end of the passage. Xian only felt the wind whistling in front of her. That 7-star sword formation's sword light was like splitting mountains and boiling water, carrying Xian straight to the end of the passage in the distance. A trace of joy flashed in Xian's heart. Then, with a wave of her hand, the golden hairpin in her hand produced a golden brilliance. This golden brilliance was like a blooming phoenix flower. In an instant, it protected Xian and the 7-star sword formation. No matter how much the pressure in the passage increased, the golden brilliance only shrunk a little. This little monk, although Xian didn't think much of Xiaohua's seriousness, the steadiness in her heart had already been shaken. The golden hairpin was her last resort. Who would have thought that it would be taken out the moment they entered the profound water palace? She couldn't describe the feeling in her heart. She turned her head with some worry, but when she saw what Xiaohua was doing, she couldn't help but be shaken. She saw Xiaohua holding a thick wishful staff in his hand. His whole body flashed with golden light. He was like a demon god who could split heaven and earth. He chased after her with large strides. Every time the wishful staff was waved, it would cause the passage to tremble. After the tremors, Xian could clearly feel the heavy pressure coming from behind her like a wave. Chapter 34-36. This little monk Xian's eyes narrowed. She knew that Xiaohua was at his wit's end. Although the wishful staff in his hand could break the heavy pressure, it could only treat the symptoms and not the root cause. Xiaohua was just drinking poison to quench his thirst. After this cycle, Xiaohua's golden Buddha statue could not support it, and his body could only end up as a meat paste. Xian clenched her teeth slightly and looked at the passage that had been flown nearly halfway. The end of the passage was already in sight, no longer as vague as before. Should I turn back? This was a rare thought in Xian's heart. At this time, Xiaohua was also helpless. This time was really dangerous, unlike the previous time. He remembered that the last time the magic staff broke the restriction, the heavy pressure disappeared. This time, although the wishful staff was far more powerful than the magic staff, the restriction was one layer after another, each layer more powerful than the last, as if there was no end. Let's fight. Xiaohua naturally also saw the golden brilliance of Xian in the distance, and his mouth was bitter. I don't know what this little girl's relationship with Princess Baihua is, but the protection of the imperial equipment is one after another. This is really embarrassing. While thinking, Xiaohua waved the wishful staff again. The heavy pressure was pervasive, but the wishful staff was not to be trifled with. It could still break the restriction that formed the heavy pressure. Taking advantage of the fact that the restriction had not been broken yet, Xiaohua's golden body was able to take the opportunity to escape. Xian naturally would not turn back at this time. She understood that although she had some means, everything was in vain before she could escape. She could not find a way. Even if she went back, it would be in vain. Therefore, Xian urged her Jinqi again, and under the protection of the golden hairpin and the 7-star sword array, she rushed toward the end of the passage. In the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the end was in sight. Xian's heart finally relaxed. In her entire life, there had never been a period of time that was more torturous than the time it took to brew a cup of tea. There was also no distance that could compare to the distance of several hundred feet. When just as Xian saw a chance of survival, the entire passageway rumbled loudly again. A golden sun seemed to be born from the depths of the abyss, chasing after Xiaohua from behind. The golden light didn't disappear at all. The moment it entered Xian's eyes, the golden light of the golden hairpin immediately swayed, and the brilliant phoenix flower instantly shrank by a lot. Seeing the sudden change in front of her, Xian had no time to think about anything else. She hurriedly stimulated her Jinqi and recklessly rushed forward. When the golden hairpin in Xian's hand started to tremble, Xian finally rushed out of the passage. She didn't have time to carefully check her surroundings. She hurriedly turned around and shouted, "Little monk," however, before she could yell out the word hurry, the tunnel was already filled with yellow light. Even though Xian hurriedly activated the clear eyes technique, and the golden light in her eyes grew brighter, she still couldn't see the situation inside the tunnel clearly. Little monk, at this moment, Xian's voice was somewhat sobbing. She was all too clear about the might of the golden hairpin in her hand. In the end, that yellow brilliance still hadn't reached its peak, yet even her golden hairpin was somewhat unable to withstand it. Admittedly, this was because her cultivation was shallow, but it was also enough to show how formidable the pressure in the passageway was. In this yellow light that was already several hundred times heavier than the initial pressure, could Xiaohua still survive? Xian was extremely suspicious. However, Xian still held on to a trace of hope. She didn't give up looking at the inside of the passageway, hoping for a miracle to happen. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, there was still no movement inside the passageway. Xian's eyes were already sore from watching. Xian slightly sighed. Her heart was filled with complex feelings. It was indescribably desolate. It was as if she had just seen a beautiful scene, but before she could properly appreciate it, dark clouds had already densely covered it. This little monk, this was already the fourth time Xian muttered, this little monk, in her heart within a short period of time. Something's not right. Just when Xian was about to give up and prepare to leave, she once again saw the 7 flying swords that had been protecting her all this time. The flying swords are still in midair. This sword formation is still there. That little monk might not necessarily be dead. Xian suddenly jumped up. A burst of joy rushed to her heart. Her eyes were somewhat moist. Sure enough, before she even got close to the passageway, an intense rumbling sound began to flash within the golden brilliance. Strands of faint blue color flowed within the golden brilliance. Flowers of lightning bloomed within the golden brilliance. The most bizarre thing was that strands of black gas were also flowing within the golden brilliance. Just when Xian was in ecstasy, Xiaohua's familiar laughter rushed out of the passageway amidst the lightning. The transcendent's golden body that was several tens of feet in size had already disappeared. Instead, strands of black gas slowly dissipated around Xiaohua's body. Seeing this, Xian's rushing figure came to an abrupt halt. Then, she suddenly turned around and flew several tens of feet away. Only then did she stop, standing still with her back facing Xiaohua. Xiaohua didn't care about Xian's actions. In his heart, he was really very lucky. Just now, it was really very dangerous. The moment the golden brilliance appeared, his transcendent's golden body instantly collapsed. The center of the passageway was completely not something that the current Xiaohua could resist. However, the moment Xiaohua's body returned to its original state, lightning and thunder immediately appeared between his eyebrows. The Soul Cultivator's lightning and thunder could obviously resist part of the heavy pressure, but it was far from enough. Xiaohua's flying speed was too slow. In a flash of inspiration, Xiaohua thought of the Devil Realm's concealment technique and immediately used it. Who would have thought that in this passageway, although Xiaohua couldn't hide in the void, his flying speed would actually increase. Therefore, under the effects of the lightning and thunder technique, and part of the blood-dripping paradise, Xiaohua finally reached the end of the passageway. As soon as he came out of the passageway, he felt a kind of physical and mental exhaustion. Even his limbs were sore and numb. He almost didn't even have the strength to stand. Xiaohua cursed, "Damn it," and immediately collapsed on the ground. When a cold feeling came from his buttocks, Xiaohua suddenly woke up and hurriedly lowered his head. Seeing his naked appearance, his face turned red. Xiaohua's monk robes were originally ordinary goods. Previously, under the protection of the Buddhist light, they didn't have any damage. However, when Xiaohua transformed into his transcendent's golden body, the monk robes had already been destroyed. However, the situation was critical at that time, and Xiaohua's whole body was covered by the golden light. No one noticed. But now awkward. Besides this, Xiaohua didn't have any other thoughts. He also finally understood why Xian suddenly turned around and flew so far away with her back to him. Alas, Xiaohua raised his hand, wanting to take out his clothes. However, his arm was abnormally sore, and he didn't have any strength. Moreover, the muscles on his arm were already twisted. Under the heavy pressure, his entire body was seriously injured. "Benefactress, please wait a moment," Xiaohua shouted, adding fuel to the fire. How could Xian pay attention to him? She just turned her back to Xiaohua and didn't say a word. After the time it took to smoke a cigarette, Xiaohua stood up shakily. He put on a new robe, formed a sword seal, and collected the 7 flying swords. Only then did he open his mouth and say, "Benefactress Xian." However, when Xian turned her head, What she gave Xiaohua wasn't the gratitude he expected. She didn't even smile. Instead, she held the golden hairpin in her hand and coldly asked Xiaohua, "Little monk, tell me honestly, who are you?" "Ah? Who am I?" Xiaohua stared blankly for a moment, then immediately woke up. After all, in this blue passage, he once again showed a cultivation that was different from that of a Buddhist disciple. No wonder Xian was vigilant again. "Benefactress, I'm afraid this is the second time you've questioned this little monk." Xiaohua rubbed his nose and said with a bitter smile, "Didn't this little monk say it before? This little monk is a Buddhist disciple from the pure land of ultimate bliss. There's no difference. The only thing that made Benefactress suspicious is that this little monk knows a lot of secret techniques that are different from that of Buddhism. This is very normal, right? Benefactress shouldn't have suspected this little monk at this time. Would a Buddhist disciple call the pure land of ultimate bliss?" Xian's face was still cold as she asked back, "Would a Buddhist disciple practice Tao techniques? Would a Buddhist disciple practice Confucian techniques?" Xiaohua shrugged and said with a smile, "Why not? Anyone who sees this little monk would think so, right? Speak. Who sent you here?" Xian couldn't bear it anymore and shouted loudly. The golden hairpin in her hand once again emitted a golden light. "Who sent you here?" Xiaohua was baffled, almost touching his nose red. This little monk was peacefully cultivating in the Great Snow Mountain. But you and Hui brought this little monk here. And you actually asked who sent me here? Who could it be? Naturally it's Hui. You still don't want to be honest? Xian shouted loudly as if she had been greatly deceived, her eyes faintly glistening with tears. Xiaohua was helpless. He raised his hand and said, "Benefactress, remember, no matter who I am, whether it's Tipu, a Taoist cultivator, or a Confucian cultivator, I'm someone who has nothing to do with you. I won't hurt you. On the contrary, I'll protect you. In this mysterious water palace, I'm in the same boat as you. You don't need to know my origin, and you don't need to know who I am. As long as you leave the mysterious water palace, you won't meet me again, and I won't know you." Xian listened to Xiaohua's words and stared at him for a long time, as if she was considering whether Xiaohua was telling the truth. Then she put away the golden hairpin and said faintly, "That's true. What does your identity have to do with me? Even if you were sent by that person, you still have to protect me. If you weren't sent by that person, you've already saved me several times. What do I have to be afraid of? My purpose in coming here is to see if that person is here. If he is, I'll think of a way. If he isn't, as long as you and I leave the mysterious water palace, we'll go our separate ways. Even if you've deceived me, what can I do?" "Good." Xiaohua clapped his hands. "That's how it should be." After saying this, Xiaohua finally had the chance to look up and see where he was. Why doesn't this place look like a palace? Xiaohua looked around and couldn't help but be surprised. In front of him was a vast open space with white clouds drifting about. The sky above the white clouds was blue. Although he couldn't see the sun, there were actually some shadows in the open space. Chapter 34-37. As for behind Xiaohua, there was a mountain peak. The several zhang wide cave had now regained its blue brilliance. Looking at the other parts of the mountain peak, there were actually many densely packed caves. They were all flashing with the same blue brilliance as the one Xiaohua and Xian flew out of. Could it be that there are many more entrances? Hui and Guzhen are also in one of them? Xiaohua's heart stirred. He hurriedly wanted to release his soul consciousness. However, in this place, even his soul consciousness could not leave his body. Perhaps one of them is an exit? Xiaohua gave up and began to ponder. Or other than the cave just now, the others are all exits? Although this was what he thought, Xiaohua did not dare to take the risk. At this time, Xian called out again. "Little monk, I'm going to take a look in front. Do you want to come with me?" Yes, let's go together." Xiaohua hurriedly responded and turned to chase after her. This open space was very cold. It seemed like ordinary soil, but it also carried a kind of coldness. From time to time, there were some blue brilliances flashing above the open space. Looking at the place in the distance, he could not see very far. Although there was no fog, it was impossible to see clearly beyond 100 zhang, let alone distinguish what it was. After walking for a while, Xiaohua wailed. "Benefactress, aren't you looking for a needle in a haystack? When is this going to end? Didn't you say time was limited? Now a lot of time has passed. How much time do we have left? I don't know either." Xian looked straight into the distance and replied indifferently. Mo Yuntong only said to go in and out as soon as possible. He did not give a specific time. Now that we're here, I don't know anything. If you want to find the exit, you can only find it yourself. I can't help you at all. Forget it, forget it. Until today, I finally know what it means to be blind. Xiaohua waved his hand and said impatiently. You're the blind one. Xian retorted sarcastically. Yes, I was blind. How could I follow you? And Xiaohua replied with a mischievous smile. Where was the dignified appearance of the little monk Bodhi? Xian was quite angry, but when it came to retorting, she was still a bit inferior to Xiaohua. Seeing that Xian was deflated, Xiaohua was quite happy. He proudly walked forward a few steps, then suddenly stopped. His eyes looked forward, and an inconceivable expression filled his face. Suddenly seeing Xiaohua calm down, Xian was not used to it. She walked in front of Xiaohua and asked tentatively, What are you doing? Did you see that? Xiaohua's reply was somewhat incoherent. It was unknown whether his raised hand was exhausted or excited, but his entire arm was trembling. Xian was baffled. She looked into the distance and asked curiously, Of course I saw it. It's just a grassland, I don't see any palaces. TSK. It's really scary to be uneducated. Xiaohua disdained Xian and lectured. Do you see that 9 feet tall spiritual tree? Which spiritual tree only had one string of scarlet heart fruits? That was an ancient spirit fruit that only grew once every 90,000 years. It's very useful for Taoist nascent soul cultivators. It can solidify the body and solidify the nascent soul. It's said that taking one is equivalent to a nascent soul cultivator cultivating for 100 years. Damn it, Xiao. This little monk has only seen it in the grass encyclopedia. Who would have thought that the profound water palace actually has it? As he spoke, Xiaohua no longer had the appearance of a weak mangy dog from before. He exerted all his strength and dashed towards the distance like a wisp of smoke. Scarlet heart fruits? Xian looked at the string of scarlet heart fruits in the distance with a confused expression. How come I've never heard of it? However, when Xian came closer and saw Xiaohua's actions, she couldn't help but be dumbfounded. She also raised her hand and pointed at the scarlet heart fruits and shouted, What are you doing? What is this thing? What did Xian see? Naturally, it was the little fruit that Xiaohua took out from the space. What else could the little fruit do after leaving the space? Of course, it was to skip over to the scarlet heart fruits and wave its hands. Rays of light fell into the roots of the scarlet heart fruits. Xiaohua naturally had to take care of such a precious ancient spirit fruit, and use his entire life to protect it. Only by transplanting it into his space could the scarlet heart fruits find the best home. I'm not doing anything. I'm just collecting some benefits. Xiaohua rolled his eyes. This little monk worked hard to come here. I can't return empty-handed, right? Since this scarlet heart fruit doesn't have any restrictions, it's naturally ownerless, right? As the saying goes, it's better to teach a man to fish than to give him a fish. Instead of picking the fruit, why not take the entire scarlet heart fruit? Hearing Xiaohua's eloquent words, Xian helplessly shook her head. She wanted to move further away from this black-hearted little monk, but when her gaze caught sight of a golden vine not far away on the ground, and at the top of the vine were 2 leaves, one big and one small, that were like flying swords, she couldn't help but cry out in surprise. Isn't this the ancient yen yuan grass? Then, she flew over almost faster than Xiaohua and shouted, With this thing, my golden eyes should be able to reach Desheng realm. You're still talking about me. Xiaohua looked at Xian's back and coldly snorted. Then, with a flick of his sleeve, he put the scarlet heart fruits that Xiaoguo had used all her strength to take out from the ground into the space and ordered. Go see if there's anything else and take it all. Instead of leaving it here, don't let this Xiao take it. Xiaoguo received the order and hurriedly left. Xiaohua, on the other hand, slowly followed behind Xiaoguo with his hands clasped behind his back, waiting to be put into the space. After harvesting a few more rare spiritual herbs, Xiaohua's excited heart gradually calmed down. It was just as Xiaohua had said to Xian. He didn't need any immortal tools or cultivation techniques. With these spiritual herbs, this trip to the profound water palace had been completed. What's this? Xiaohua's heart calmed down. He could see a lot. After Xiaoguo dug out a spiritual herb from the ground, the usual blue light filled the entire pit, and a strand of red copper light appeared in the blue light. Xiaohua's eyes lit up, and he shouted in his heart. That hand nimbly made a grabbing motion, and with a sound, a red copper object fell into Xiaohua's hand. This is a command token. Xiaohua's gaze fell on the palm-sized square object in his hand, and he immediately came to a realization. No, this command token was exactly the same as the command tokens Xiaohua had obtained before. However, this command token was cast with a vicious rabbit head. Xiaohua looked at the rabbit head in bewilderment and secretly said, "Damn, why is this rabbit so fierce? It doesn't look like a rabbit at all." However, the other command tokens seem to be the same, right? With this thought, Xiaohua looked at Xian, who had run off to pick the abyss-amplifying grass in the distance. With a wave of his hand, 4 identical command tokens appeared in his hand. Xiaohua carefully looked at them. Sure enough, aside from the tiger head and snake head, which should have been fierce, the remaining ox head, pig head, and this rabbit head all had a fierce appearance. Where was the simple, honest, stupid, and lively appearance that they should have? These command tokens, what is the use of them? They're actually distributed in the Dawn Rain continent and Western Paradise? Xiaohua pinched his chin and looked at the 5 command tokens with a frown. Previously, he had used his divine sense and Buddhist sense to check them, but it was to no avail. Now that he was in the profound water palace, he couldn't even release his soul sense. Xiaohua was afraid that he could only think about it. If it's useful, then it'll be of great use. Xiaohua moved his gaze away from the command tokens. Seeing Xiaoguo's nimble movements, he was already beaming with joy in his heart. However, this thought flashed through his mind, and he put away the command tokens again. He strode to Xiaoguo's side. Even if he didn't need to do anything, seeing so much harvest that was about to be put into his space still made him happy. Xian very smoothly picked the abyss-amplifying grass, and carefully put it into the jade box. Usually there would be some demonic beasts near this kind of ancient spirit herb. Not only did they covet this spirit herb, but they also coexisted with the spirit herb to speed up their cultivation. Naturally, there were no other demonic beasts in the profound water palace, so the abyss-amplifying grass had no protection. After Xian put away the jade box, she turned around. Before she could call out to Xiaohua, she was already standing there in a daze. It was very simple. The abyss-amplifying grass grew between several stalks of spiritual herbs. When Xian was picking the abyss-amplifying grass, she had carefully avoided those stalks of spiritual herbs for fear of injuring them. However, at this moment, those spiritual herbs were all gone. Even the area around her was completely empty. The ground was flat as if it had never been planted before. Little monk Xian was angry. "What are you doing? If you picked them, then so be it. After all, these are all ancient spirit herbs. Who knows how old they are? But why did you pull them out by the roots?" Xiaohua lazily raised his head and said with a smile, "Benefactor Xian, these spirit herbs are heavenly treasures. If you put them in the profound water palace, only a ghost would come. Isn't this a reckless waste of heavenly treasures? If this little monk takes these spirit herbs out of the profound water palace, who knows how many Buddhist disciples will benefit from them? TCH. Only a ghost would believe that." Xian rebuked. The Buddhist sect's Arhat doesn't need any spirit herbs. It's clearly your own greed. If you're talking about greed, that's not necessarily the case. Xiaohua smiled and touched his nose. For example, Benefactor Xian picked this abyss-amplifying grass on her own. But what if there's someone else who needs it? Would that person still want to enter the profound water palace? This little monk isn't bragging. Even if there were 10 more people from your Xian clan, I'm afraid they wouldn't be able to walk out of the passage behind us. Tell me, if this isn't selfish of you, then what is it? Could it be that if this little monk takes this abyss-amplifying grass out, your Confucian Xian clan won't benefit? I don't know how to grow spirit herbs. Xian actually blushed at Xiaohua's words. However, at the same time, she suddenly realized something and hurriedly turned to look at the place where she had just picked the abyss-amplifying grass. Ah! Xian couldn't help but cry out in alarm. However, the moment she spoke, the roots of the abyss-amplifying grass had already disappeared. The spirit herbs within a few feet to her left were all held by a fair child wearing a bib. His eyes were full of vigilance as he slipped away from her. Chapter 34-38. Looking at Xiaoguo's cute appearance and the vigilance in her big, dark eyes, Xian felt a burst of anger for no reason. She fiercely kicked the ground and shouted, "Shameless! Thief! Robber!" Although the ground looked very flat, it was actually very soft. Xian's kick not only scared Xiaoguo so much that she quickly ran behind Xiaohua, but also kicked up the soil. Even a few shiny white things were kicked out by her. Xian swept her eyes over them like a stubborn little girl, and gave a cold snort. But when Xiaohua's gaze swept over them, he couldn't help but be overjoyed. He hastily waved his hand and those white bones immediately fell into his hand, disappearing without a trace. Amitba, Benefactor Xian, this little monk doesn't know if Confucian cultivators like you talk about reincarnation and retribution in the next life. Xiaohua's face became solemn as he said righteously. But this little monk knows that whether it's Buddhism, Taoism, or Confucianism, they all emphasize the dead. Although I don't know which senior these bones belong to, and I don't know if he's a Buddhist, Taoist, or Confucian cultivator, he's already passed away. We the living should retain a bit of respect for him. Blaspheming the corpse of a senior like you is really disrespectful. Forget it. Let this little monk take these bones back to nirvana. I'll chant sutras every day and recite incantations every night, so that he can reincarnate soon. Although Xian didn't care about these bones, she also saw how thick they were. How could she not know that these bones didn't belong to an ordinary person? Now that Xiaohua took the bones and still pretended to be obedient, her face was ashen with anger. She stretched out a white finger and pointed at the complacent Xiaohua. She didn't know what to say. You just take it. Perhaps this is your corpse from your previous life. In your previous life, you failed to explore the profound water palace and died here. In this life, you came here under this princess's lead. Since you've received this lady's benefits, why don't you thank this lady? Yes, it seems this skeleton is really fated with this little monk. This little monk thanks the lady for leading the way. This little monk thanks the lady for kicking this skeleton. Xiaohua put his palms together and lowered his head as he said sincerely, "From now on, this little monk will also chant sutras every day and recite incantations every night. If this lady dies here, may Buddha bless you so that you can come here in your next life." You. Xian said you 4 times in a row. She had never seen such a glib-tongued person in her life, let alone such a glib-tongued little monk. What about me? Xiaohua touches his bald head and says curiously, could it be that Benefactress has never seen such a peerless and magnificent monk before? Disgusting. Xian pretended to retch a few times and curled her lips. She turned her head and ignored Xiaohua as she walked forward. Woman Tanyu, don't go too far. Xiaohua put on an act behind his back and said, this little monk still needs to sleep at night. I don't want to recite the rebirth mantra for someone. There was no way Xian would turn her head back, but the corners of her mouth unconsciously curled into a smile. Seeing that Xian had left, Xiaohua hurriedly sent his consciousness into the space. He saw that the huge white bones that he had just sent into the space had already fused with the previous white bones. The lightning water mixed with traces of lightning seemed to be endlessly falling into the space. It seemed to be nourishing these white bones, and also seemed to be awakening them at any time. Damn it, these white bones. How could they also be scattered in the Xiaoyu continent in Western Paradise? Jade Archive Xiaohua frowned. As the white bones gradually gathered together, Jade Archive Xiaohua could already smell a trace of danger from these white bones. Who is the owner of these white bones? What can I do? The most beautiful thing in this world is confusing matters. Being able to find the reason from the confusion is also the most interesting thing in this world. Suddenly, Jade Archive Xiaohua spoke again from Jiuxia's mouth. Damn it, Jiuxia, you really are like a ghost that won't disperse. A rare wry smile appeared on Jade Archive Xiaohua's face. Then, with a wave of his hand, Little Thunder, who had been nourishing under the lightning water, fell into Jade Archive Xiaohua's arms. Looking at Little Thunder's increasingly plump body and the slightly moving eyeballs under its eyelids, Jade Archive Xiaohua understood that the day of Little Thunder's awakening was not far away. Hee, let me calculate while speaking. Jade Archive Xiaohua waved his hand and Little Thunder disappeared. In an instant, it reappeared under the lightning water. At the same time, Jade Archive Xiaohua's left hand slowly stretched out, and then his 5 fingers slowly formed a seal. The 5 fingers were extremely slow, as if a huge mountain was hanging on each finger. As the seal formed, a roar that shook the earth and mountains was produced in the entire space. The 5 finger shadows swayed in the entire space. With these finger shadows, the karma hand that was previously hidden in the space of Heaven Way quietly appeared again. However, before the spell similar to the hand of karma could be formed, the huge roar shook again. The 9 suns in the sky dimmed, the mountains and rivers were on the verge of collapsing, and even Xiaohua himself was trembling. Fellow Taoist, do you want to die? Green-robed Xiaohua appeared in front of Jade Archive Xiaohua with a panicked face and said anxiously, Our space has just been formed, and the yin and yang and the 5 elements have just been established. We can't allow fellow Taoist to ravage it again. Even if fellow Taoist wants to use the innate 5 elements and reverse yin and yang, you should do it outside. After all, fellow Taoist's 5 elements and yin and yang are outside. Before fellow Taoist controls the entire space, you must not bring the karma of the outside world into this space. Hearing this, Jade Archive Xiaohua immediately understood and didn't dare to form another seal. He hurriedly flicked his 5 fingers, and the entire space immediately became quiet. Then he cupped his hands and said, Thank you fellow Taoist for reminding me. This is my fault. No need to thank me, no need to thank me. This is our home, and we have to cherish each other. I am not like some primordial spirits who don't treat this place as their home. Green-robed Xiaohua actually curled his lips, looking quite strange. Jade Archive Xiaohua naturally knew that green-robed Xiaohua was talking about the bone-tempering Xiaohua. So he just smiled slightly, cupped his hands and left the space. He clearly knew that in this space, he had a feeling of controlling everything. Naturally, he could try to use the karma hand seal. However, outside the space, he was just a nascent soul cultivator. The amount of magic power he could use was limited. Although his nascent soul could communicate with heaven and earth and borrow the power of heaven and earth, his nascent soul was too weak and couldn't withstand the backlash of the karma hand seal. He was afraid that he could only reach the spirit severing stage or the unity stage, fusing his nascent soul with his physical body. Then his physical body would be able to communicate with heaven and earth like a nascent soul. Only then would he be able to rely on his demigod body to activate such a mysterious karma hand seal. After Xiaohua left the space, he urged Xiaoguo to move all of the spirit herbs and spirit trees from the profound water palace into the space. In another part of the profound water palace, there was a crystal wall that was over 1,000 feet high. Hundreds of huge triangular patterns were densely arranged on the wall. Each of these patterns was deeply indented, and the 3 sides of the patterns were protruding like a frame. These protrusions overflowed with different kinds of brilliance. Layer upon layer of magic power fluctuations surged like a tide. Suddenly, a triangle near the top of the wall emitted a bright blue brilliance. However, before the brilliance could be released, A tidal wave of magic power rushed towards the brilliance. In a few breaths of time, the brilliance was annihilated. However, in the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the brilliance of the triangle appeared again. As a result, the magic power fluctuations that had just calmed down rushed over again, and strangled the brilliance of the triangle. This repeated several times. In the end, the brilliance was extremely brilliant, like a butterfly breaking out of its cocoon, and finally bloomed. Boom! After the brilliance, a loud noise was heard. A huge hole appeared on the triangle. 2 monks covered in blood rushed out from the hole. Weren't they Cai Hui and Guzhen, who had parted ways with Xiaohua and Xian? At this time, the 2 of them were in an extremely sorry state. The green lotus in Cai Hui's left hand seemed to have been eaten by worms, with only a small half of it remaining. The sword in his right hand was already broken, and even the remaining sword edge seemed to have been eaten by worms, with spots on it. Cai Hui's originally neat monk robe was now in tatters. In addition to the sporadic bloodstains, there were large bloodstains on his arms, legs, back, and front of his heart. There was also an extremely long bloodstain on his neck, which was still flowing with blood. Cai Hui was like this, but Guzhen was even worse. There were no sporadic bloodstains on Guzhen's monk robe. It was completely covered in large bloodstains. Under these bloodstains, the monk robe was completely torn. Under the monk robe, there were fist-sized wounds. Some of the filthy blood had already coagulated, while others were still bleeding. Even the hand that Guzhen used to hold the demon's subduing pestle was riddled with scars. Several torn muscles and flesh were exposed outside of the skin, shaking slightly with the trembling of Guzhen's arm. The demon's subduing pestle was not in good condition either. It was full of bumps and hollows, especially the tip of the pestle, which was now broken. There were still a few strands of flesh and blood on it. On the right side of Guzhen's face, a large piece of flesh was torn off. His white teeth were exposed. Guzhen's originally fierce face was now even more ferocious. If someone saw him at this time, they would not be able to classify him as a Buddhist disciple. Guzhen and Cai Hui rushed out of the hole. They could not stand still in the air at all. With 2 muffled thuds, the 2 of them fell to the ground at the same time. It was unknown whether the 2 of them were exhausted or had fainted, but both of them lay on the ground without moving. After the time it took to finish a meal, Guzhen shook her body and struggled to stand up from the ground. She said shakily, "Cai Hui, can you still move?" Grandmaster, hearing Guzhen's voice, Cai Hui also shook his body and slowly climbed up from the ground. However, he still could not stand up. He could only sit cross-legged on the ground. After a while, he took a deep breath and said softly, "This disciple should be able to hold on." Chapter 34-39. Sai Guzhen uses the demon's subduing pestle to prop himself on the ground, making his body seem extremely heavy. He turns around to look at the crystal wall, especially the triangle they rushed out of, and says with lingering fear, What kind of ancient formation is this? How can it be so powerful? It's just a passage, but there are demon beasts and strange insects comparable to 5th-level essence energy cultivators inside. This demon beast is nothing. If we work together and risk getting injured, we can still kill it. But these strange insects are impervious to fire and water, and can even devour our Buddhist artifacts. They didn't even let go of this old monk's golden Buddha statue. What are these things? Speaking up to hear, Guzhen looks at Cai Hui and asks, "Just now you released the Bodhi Sarira to attract the strange insects. Is your Sarira seriously damaged?" Ba, Cai Hui lowers her head and says, "Many thanks for Grandmaster's concern. Disciple's Sarira is fine." "That's good." Guzhen grins and smiles with difficulty. "This Sarira is the proof of your enlightenment. Don't be careless." Disciple understands. Cai Hui smiles faintly and stands up with some difficulty. "Forget it, since we're here, we're one step closer to the ancient Buddha's Sarira." Guzhen knocks the demon subduing pestle on the ground and calls out, "This old monk wants to see if there's anything else that can stop us." Cai Hui doesn't rush to speak, instead looks around and reminds, "Grandmaster, there's no trace of Xian Tanua and Tipu here. Could it be they still haven't come out of the passage?" Saying so, Xia Hui looks worriedly at the many triangles on the huge wall, guessing where Xiaohua and Xian Tanua will rush out from. Xia Hui Guzhen sighs and shakes his head. This old monk advises you not to be delusional. This passage is so dangerous. Even if Xian Tanua has an extraordinary background and an extremely powerful imperial artifact, I'm afraid he won't be able to escape. You saw it yourself. Those thousands of strange insects are definitely not something the two of them can deal with. Xia Hui frowns slightly and answers. All right, Grandmaster knows. Disciple feels that Tipu's cultivation is not below disciples. With his help, Xian Tanua might be able to rush out. That's your feeling. Guzhen was not optimistic about Xiaohua and Xian's chances. This old monk thinks that Tipu's Buddhist treasure is somewhat powerful, but his Buddhist divine ability is not worth mentioning. Perhaps the paths they took were different. He won't come out from here. After waiting for a while and not seeing any movement, Xia Hui asked hesitantly, Grandmaster, should we proceed? Of course, I'm already here. I can even smell the scent of the ancient Buddha. How can I not move forward? Guzhen raised his demon-subduing pestle and said in high spirits. But Xia Hui spoke again. Does Grandmaster have any medicine for injuries? We are all heavily injured. If we don't treat our injuries, I'm afraid we won't be able to deal with any abnormalities. Guzhen nodded. He took out a few jade bottles and handed them to Xia Hui. These are the medicines commonly used by Buddhists. Take a look and you'll understand. There's no need for us to waste time. Let's take it as we go. Xia Hui accepted the bottles and nodded in agreement. In front of Xia Hui and Guzhen was a huge corridor. The floor, walls, and ceiling were all made of huge blue stones. The stones were densely covered with strange patterns, and between the patterns were some simple runes. Wisps of obscure energy waves emanated from these runes. The light on the blue stones was weak and not enough to illuminate the corridor. However, there was light coming from somewhere in the corridor, illuminating the entire place. As Xia Hui and Guzhen walked in, they could even see the runes above their heads clearly. Looking at the huge corridor, Xia Hui was somewhat bewildered. She whispered, Grandmaster, isn't this corridor a little too tall? Even the Blackwater Palace we saw earlier wasn't this big. That was right. This corridor was as tall as the crystal wall that Xia Hui and Guzhen had rushed out of earlier. It was at least 1,000 feet tall. Walking in it, Xia Hui and Guzhen were like ants. Even if Guzhen displayed his golden Buddha body, it was still pathetically small. Guzhen didn't answer Xia Hui's question. Instead, he carefully took out the jade bottles, and either swallowed them or applied them externally. After treating the wounds all over his body, he raised his eyes and glanced to the left. He said indifferently, So what if it's tall? There's no Buddha ancestor or Buddha light. It's just a void. Ba. Xia Hui's pale face blushed slightly. She put her palms together and said, This disciple understands. Guzhen no longer paid any attention to Xia Hui. He strode forward. His footsteps were heavy, but they were unusually firm. Clearly, he had to obtain the ancient Buddha luster in the profound water palace. At this moment, Xia Hui was somewhat hesitant. She slowed down a few steps and walked behind Guzhen. Looking at Guzhen's tall back and the bloodstains on his monk robes, and even the bloodstains on his feet, she narrowed her eyes. She also picked up the jade bottles and began applying medicine. However, Xia Hui's somewhat clumsy movements clearly showed that she was rarely injured and was inexperienced. In the time it took to brew a cup of tea, Xia Hui had already finished cleaning up. When he placed the jade bottle into his bosom, he bit his lips tightly. His slightly narrowed eyes from before had already opened. His eyes that were like stars revealed a kind of clarity. The corridor was naturally a wall again. However, this wall was different from the crystal wall that Xia Hui and Guzhen had rushed out of. It was a huge azure rock. Xia Hui couldn't release her Buddha sense, so she naturally couldn't see the situation of the huge rock. However, her gaze fell on the huge rock. There were faint white clouds flowing in the azure sky. Obviously, there was a restriction on the huge rock. Since there was a restriction, Xia Hui was sure that there must be something behind the huge rock. Perhaps it was the fairy weapon that Xian was looking for, or perhaps it was the Kylie that Guzhen was looking for. Guzhen walked to the front of the stone wall. Without hesitation like Xia Hui expected, he turned and walked towards the right corridor. Xia Hui naturally followed suit. However, the moment he turned right, Xia Hui's shoulders suddenly trembled and she stopped. She then turned slightly and looked behind her from the corner of her eyes. A wisp of slight hesitation floated in Xia Hui's eyes like smoke. She then said, "Grandmaster Guzhen, Guzhen stopped and asked rather unhappily, "What's the matter?" "This disciple feels that the direction you're going is wrong," Xia Hui said with a sincere smile. "Grandmaster should take this path." With that, Xia Hui modestly turned sideways and put her palms together as if inviting Guzhen to go first. "Oh, why is it this path and not the path that I have taken? Could it be that you've discovered something?" Guzhen's eyes widened. His surprised voice was very loud and clear, sounding as if he was asking a question. Xia Hui was still gentle and amiable. She smiled and said, "How should I put it? This disciple has a feeling that the ancient Buddha Kylie is in that direction. If there's any evidence, this disciple doesn't have it." Guzhen frowned slightly. There were still traces of blood on his face. Although he had taken a Buddhist spiritual medicine, the medicine's effect was obviously not that effective. Guzhen's frown made him look extremely ferocious. He seemed to be pondering. In the end, Xia Hui was somewhat puzzled. Just as she was about to raise her head, she heard Guzhen's voice again. "Fine. A Buddhist with a root of wisdom like you must be more sensitive to this Sarira than this old monk. I'll listen to you." "Grandmaster, please." Xia Hui stretched out her hand and gestured for Guzhen to go first. She also expressed that she had no intention of having any thoughts about the ancient Buddha Kylie. Guzhen nodded again. There was a hint of coldness in his eyes. However, Xia Hui didn't notice it. In fact, there was nothing special about the two sides of the stone wall. Even the texture on the tall stone wall was similar. The smooth stone wall didn't have any decorations. It looked no different from a cave. However, the passage seemed to be extremely long. Guzhen was in front and Xia Hui was behind. After walking for the time it took to finish a meal, there was still no door. It was as if the passage had no end. Even so, Xia Hui was still careful. The Buddhist light around her flickered faintly. She was ready to receive the profound water palace's attack at any time. Xia Hui Guzhen's footsteps slowed. He asked faintly, "Your feeling seems to be wrong. Why haven't we seen anything after walking for so long? Why don't you return with this old monk?" Xia Hui smiled. "Grandmaster, don't be anxious. Perhaps it's just ahead. This disciple's feeling should be right." Guzhen shook his head and said, "Xia Hui, although you know the heaven's feet, and you are one of the few disciples in our Buddhist league who is proficient in the 5 senses, the heaven's feet is just the heaven's feet, not the heaven's eyes, heaven's ears, and mind reading. In this old monk's opinion, you should return with this old monk." Guzhen emphasized the mind-reading ability so heavily that Xia Hui was quite puzzled. However, he hastily stopped Guzhen and said, "Grandmaster, please listen to this disciple. The ancient Buddha Kylie is really in front of us. This disciple absolutely does not dare to deceive Grandmaster. Xia Hui, repent and be saved," Guzhen shouted. Without hesitation, he lifted his leg and was about to turn around. Boom! Guzhen's foot landed on the ground, causing the entire passage to shake. The stone wall actually emitted a faint brilliance as it shook. "Oh!" Guzhen was stunned. He looked at the bottom of his foot in disbelief, then took a step forward with his other foot. Dong! Another loud sound rang out, and the tunnel shook again. Ba? What's going on?" Guzhen was surprised. He wanted to lift his leg again, but Xia Hui was looking into the distance. He cried out involuntarily, Grandmaster, you look over there." Boom! Another loud sound. This time, Guzhen's leg didn't land on the ground. Guzhen immediately understood, and hurriedly turned to look. Guzhen's expression changed greatly when he saw what was going on. In the tunnel 200 feet away, a giant had appeared out of nowhere. This giant was several hundred zhang tall. Its huge body was suitable for walking in this enormous passage. Only now did Xiai Hui and Guzhen realize that the passage was so enormous that it was meant for this giant to pass through. Chapter 3440. When Xiai Hui saw the giant, she called out without hesitation, "Grandmaster, run!" However, after controlling the cloud to fly for a while, he didn't see Guzhen following him. When he looked back, not only did Guzhen not follow him, he even controlled the cloud to meet the giant. "Grandmaster!" Xiai Hui shouted. "We're all seriously injured now. How can we fight? It's better to hide first." However, Guzhen didn't care about Xiai Hui at all. He waved the demon-subduing pestle in his hand in the air, and his flying speed increased again. This Xiai Hui stood in the air, biting her lips. After a moment of hesitation, she waved her hand, and the short sword drew a cold light in the air. She sighed and said, "Forget it. Since I've decided, so be it." Then Xiai Hui controlled the cloud to chase after the giant. Thump, thump, the giant's footsteps became more frequent, and he was getting closer to Xiai Hui. At this moment, Xiai Hui saw clearly that the giant was covered in a layer of aqua blue armor. Not only did the armor cover the giant's body, but the helmet on his head also covered the giant's entire face. She couldn't see the giant's face clearly at all. The armor even covered the giant's hands and feet, and not a trace of skin was exposed. Just as Xiai Hui was sizing up the giant, there was a buzzing sound, and the Buddhist light around Guzhen's body shone brightly. Then Guzhen's body began to expand. Obviously, he was going to use the golden Buddha body. Xiai Hui couldn't help but cry out, "Grandmaster, you can't use the golden Buddha body in your current situation. Earlier in the passage, your golden Buddha body was on the verge of collapse. If you force it now, I'm afraid you won't be able to. Isn't the collapse of my golden Buddha body what you wanted?" Guzhen sneered. "Didn't you bring me here so that I could act as your vanguard? If I die in the hands of this giant, won't the ancient Buddha shrine be yours?" "Grandmaster?" Xiai Hui's expression changed greatly, and she hurriedly argued, "You've misunderstood. How could I know there was a giant here? I only sensed the ancient Buddha shrine. Hehe, although the ancient Buddha shrine is an ancient item, it's still a relic. Don't tell me you've forgotten that I'm a guardian who can devour relics. Even with old Na's lotus cultivation base, I can't sense Tsili. How do you know?" Guzhen stared at the giant as he flew, then sneered. "This ancient Buddha fortune might be useful to this old monk, but wouldn't it be even more useful to you? How could this old monk not know what you're thinking? Martial ancestor really doesn't know what disciple is thinking." Xiai Hui's face revealed a bitter smile. "Alright, I really don't know what you're thinking. And I don't want to know," Guzhen said indifferently. "But since you don't covet the ancient Buddha Kylie, let this old monk see your sincerity. This old monk has spent a lot of effort to get here, so I won't return empty-handed." Xiai Hui's mouth was extremely bitter. She nodded and said, "Yes, disciple will let Grandmaster understand. Disciple will absolutely not fight with Grandmaster over this." Speaking of this, Xiai Hui seemed to have suddenly realized something. She looked at Guzhen in disbelief and shouted, "Racked my brains? Grandmaster? Could it be that the little monk's story?" Seeing Xiai Hui's enlightened expression, Guzhen narrowed his eyes and said coldly, "That's right. I can't believe you can think of something like this. If it weren't for this story, would Benefactor Xian and Monk Tipu have willingly come to the Mystic Water Palace? This is an ancient array. Who would have the guts to come here if they weren't at the 6th or 7th level of origin energy? It's already good that we were lucky enough to get here. Xian and Tipu. I'm afraid they've already died in the passage." Forget it, Xiai Hui sighed. Poor junior brother Tipu. When he warned this old monk thought he was being too petty. But now it seems, the human heart is not what it used to be. Even a Buddhist disciple has a human heart inside him. Haha, what did the little monk Tipu say? Guzhen looked up at the giant who was still far away and asked calmly. Nothing. Xiai Hui's voice was already calm, as if she had accepted Guzhen's change. She said indifferently, "He only said to be careful of Grandmaster." Although Xiai Hui emphasized the word Grandmaster, Gu Zhen was not moved. He only said, "It doesn't matter if you don't say it. Anyway, the little monk is dead. No one will know what happened here." Xi Hui asked indifferently again, "Grandmaster, are you really going to devour this disciple's sarira?" TSK Gu Zhen stuck out his tongue and licked it. "With the ancient Buddha sarira, this old monk naturally won't have any ideas about you. You forged a Bodhi sarira. In this life, you'll definitely attain the Buddha fruit of Bodhisattva. This old monk doesn't dare to be delusional. However, if you want to attain the Buddha fruit, you must escape today. This old monk doesn't think you can safely return to the passage now. As for whether you can defeat the giant, that depends on your luck. If you can't even defeat the giant, then your Buddha fruit is illusory." Hearing that Gu Zhen didn't intend to devour her sarira, Xi Hui's expression became slightly better. She looked at the giant and said, "No matter what you think, Grandmaster, you don't have to say what you've done. Since Grandmaster has protected my Buddhist sect and done a meritorious deed for my Pure Land world, then this disciple is willing to lend Grandmaster a hand. Fight the giant and get the sarira. Don't say those useless things. Let's fight." Gu Zhen waved the demon subduing pestle in his hand and said, "This giant is very strange. It doesn't have the pressure of an ordinary Dao cultivator. It doesn't even have any magic power fluctuations. It's really an unfathomable person. You and I may not be its opponent. I'm afraid this is the place of nirvana for us. War puppet." Suddenly, Xi Hui thought of something and said in shock, "Oh no, this is a war puppet of the Dao sect." "War puppet?" Gu Zhen narrowed his eyes and seemed to understand. He said in a low voice, "Is it the war puppet and general puppet of the Confucian cultivators?" "Yes, if this disciple is right, this must be a war puppet of the Dao sect." Xi Hui nodded and said, "How can an ordinary cultivator have such a tall Dharma idol? Even if it's a Dharma idol, it can't be so heavy. Unless it's a war puppet tempered by an ancient secret technique. Its body is made of materials that have been tempered thousands of times. No magic weapon or Buddhist treasure can break it." "Hee, that's good." Gu Zhen showed a rare smile on his face. "Since it's not a real Dao cultivator and is just a dead object, I still have a way to deal with it. Although we Buddhist sect disciples abstain from eating meat and fish, the magic weapon in my hand is not to be trifled with. Grandmaster, don't underestimate it. The Dao sect's magic power is boundless." Xi Hui hurriedly shouted when he saw that the giant war puppet had run to 100 feet away from them, and the thick spear in its right hand was already waving. The wind was calling, and the flashing cold light was about to reach them. Sadly, before he could finish his words, Gu Zhen's golden Buddha statue, which was over 100 feet long, had already flown up into the air. Gu Zhen's thick arm reached out, and under the effect of his willpower, the alms bowl that he had been holding in his hand flew up into the air. At the same time, Gu Zhen interrupted him. "It's useless to say more. Fight!" As the alms bowl flew up into the air, a golden light was emitted from the alms bowl, and instantly covered the war puppet. When the golden light fell, the war puppet didn't resist at all. "Withdraw." Gu Zhen was not happy but frightened. He was already nervous, but he still formed a seal with one hand and chanted a mantra. As the Buddhist seal fell, the golden light in the alms bowl became brighter, and the suction force also increased greatly. However, the war puppet didn't seem to have noticed the golden light, and didn't stop at all. It kept moving forward and the long spear even sped up. Gu Zhen hurriedly moved back and activated his psyche power again. Unfortunately, although the suction force of the alms bowl was strong, it only made the war puppet's limbs float slightly. If he didn't take the whole war puppet into the alms bowl, he couldn't do it. Rise, rise, rise. Seeing that the ordinary method didn't work, Gu Zhen slapped his head and roared 3 times. Above his head, another Buddhist light soared into the sky and turned into a golden lotus, which fell on the alms bowl. Buzz buzz. The alms bowl, the Buddhist treasure of the Buddhist sect, actually produced a rumbling sound just like the magical treasure of the Taoist sect. The Buddhist light that rushed out from the alms bowl turned into tiny lotuses that fell on the body of the battle avatar. Soon after, dragon roars came out from the lotuses. The lotuses shattered and numerous heavenly dragons and strongmen of the Buddhist sect appeared from the shattered lotuses. These heavenly dragons and strongmen of the Buddhist sect revolved around the battle avatar. The entire area of several hundred feet was covered by this Buddhist phenomenon. Good. Seeing that the huge war puppet was slowly lifted into the air by the dragons and strongmen, Xiai Hui was secretly delighted. However, before he could put his palms together, the war puppet, which had just risen a few feet, suddenly raised its hand and pierced the alms bowl with a blue spear. Withdraw, Guzhen sneered and made another seal with one hand. The alms bowl not only expanded but also strengthened its suction force. The war puppet lost its balance and was sucked several feet higher. Hiss, the battle puppet that hadn't made any sound all this time suddenly released a sound that resembled the hiss of a viper from within its armor. The spear that it had raised actually left its hand, and like a streak of lightning, it struck towards the alms bowl in midair. You're courting death. Guzhen didn't even blink. He pointed his finger, and the alms bowl roared louder and rotated. The Buddhist light also turned into a lotus-shaped vortex around the alms bowl. Puff, with a soft sound, the spear, which was hundreds of feet long, disappeared into the Buddhist light and didn't cause any ripples. It can't be? It's that simple? Xiai Hui, who had retreated hundreds of feet, was stunned when she saw the war puppet's spear being absorbed by the bone staff. You come in too. Guzhen laughed. It's just a lifeless war puppet. Before Guzhen's laughter died away, something strange happened. In the lotus-shaped Buddhist light, a thin water-blue brilliance emerged like the head of a spirit snake. Then, it expanded and lengthened rapidly, following the trajectory of the spear and falling into the war puppet's hand. Chapter 34-41. What? Oh no. Guzhen's laughter stopped abruptly. Before he could react, the war puppet raised its hand again. Bang. With a loud bang, the Buddha's light on the alms bowl disappeared. Not only did the countless heavenly dragons and strongmen disappear instantly, but the alms bowl also shrank rapidly. Swoosh, the poisonous water in the alms bowl immediately fell from the air. Looking at the water again, the shrunken alms bowl had been pierced by the long spear, and a blue spear tip came out from the bottom of the alms bowl. Guzhen's expression changed greatly. He clenched his teeth and ignored the alms bowl. He raised his hand again, and placed it on top of his head. Puff, another Buddha's light soared into the sky. Kill, with a roar, Guzhen's Buddha's light turned into a 30-meter-long palm. It dodged the long spear, and hit the puppet directly. The puppet hurriedly shook the long spear to get rid of the alms bowl. However, the alms bowl had its own universe. How could it be thrown away so easily? Seeing that the long spear couldn't be pulled back in a short time, the puppet's left hand flashed with blue light. The long spear gradually became thinner and shorter, while its right hand clenched into a fist and hit the huge palm in the air. Oh no! Xiai Hui naturally understood that the long spear was so powerful. How could it be an ordinary weapon? If Xiai Hui guessed correctly, it must be a magic treasure of the Taoism sect. Xiai Hui didn't dare to be careless. She hurriedly used her remaining psyche power to send a message. She didn't know whether Guzhen heard the message or not. At this moment, with a loud bang, Guzhen's huge palm was smashed by the puppet's right fist. At the same time, the puppet was also slapped down by the huge palm. When the puppet fell to the ground, the whole passage shook. The long spear was also taken back by the puppet. However, Xiai Hui saw that the puppet's right hand was broken. Guzhen's huge palm was a blow from the Buddhist sect's Lotus Realm Guardian. It was not easy for the puppet to block it. Although the huge palm was effective against the puppet, Xiai Hui didn't feel happy. She knew that Guzhen didn't have the psyche power to use the huge palm now. As expected, Guzhen roared again. Kill, the demon-subduing pestle in Guzhen's hand drew a yellow light in the air and smashed toward the puppet's right hand. Seeing that Guzhen's Dharmakaya body, which was much taller than him, was still like a child in front of the puppet, Xiai Hui had mixed feelings. If it was before, she might be able to fight it. But now, how could she fight? Wu, an extremely ear-piercing and sharp sound resounded abruptly, and it was precisely the sound of the combat puppet brandishing its spear. Xiai Hui's heart, with the impulse of hot blood gushing out of her body. Ba Ci Hui hurriedly activated the Buddhist sect's supernatural power. A loud Buddhist chant came out from her mouth. Immediately, the Buddhist light around her body shone brightly. She tried her best to restrain her qi and blood. How could it be so powerful? Ci Hui didn't expect that the puppet's attack could be a sound attack. She was shocked. But when she swept the long spear, she was even more shocked. She saw traces of black and white light flashing in the air where the long spear passed. Although the light flashed and disappeared, Ci Hui could see that the puppet's attack had the tendency of tearing the void apart. It was not a coincidence that the alms bowl was broken. How could the current him, or even Guzhen, withstand such a powerful attack? Moreover, the long spear was extremely fast and its attack range was wide. Although Guzhen had already flown up and attacked the long spear with his demon-subduing pestle, he couldn't compare with the long spear in terms of momentum and power. The long spear was like a blue rainbow bridge. It had already arrived in front of Guzhen. It seemed that the long spear could pierce through Guzhen's golden body in a few breaths. Guzhen's fighting style was purely using his weakness against the enemy's strength. Grandmaster. Ci Hui didn't dare to be careless. The Buddhist seal in her left hand burst out, and the sword in her right hand also waved. Waves of psyche power rushed out, and the Buddhist seal turned into a big hand that slapped at the puppet's arm. The Buddhist light on the sword surged, and thousands of heavenly flowers and fairies appeared indistinctly. Then, a shadow came out of the sword and slashed at the puppet's arm. Boom! Guzhen's demon-subduing pestle hit the long spear. As Ci Hui expected, Guzhen's golden body seemed to have been struck by lightning. While it trembled rapidly, the golden body crashed into the stone wall on the side of the passage. Bang! The golden body crashed into the stone wall, and wisps of golden liquid splashed on it. Before the liquid could flow down the wall, the runes on the huge stone wall overflowed, and immediately absorbed the liquid. Guzhen's face was now dark gold, and the expression on his face couldn't be seen clearly. The long spear sent Guzhen flying, but it didn't stop at all. As the puppet flipped its hand, the long spear streaked across the air and stabbed at Guzhen's heart at an angle. Fight! Guzhen shouted and raised the demon-subduing pestle with both hands. His body flew up from the stone wall and met the long spear again. Puff! Puff! Two weak sounds rang out. It was Ci Hui's Buddhist seal and sword that struck the puppet's arm. Unfortunately, the puppet's arm flashed with a layer of faint blue light. On top of the blue light, the dazzling golden Buddhist seal flashed with an intense brilliance. However, in the blink of an eye, the Buddhist seal disappeared under the blue light. On the contrary, the treasured sword left a shallow wound on the arm of the battle puppet. However, a bright white color surged out from the wound. When the blue color surged out from the wound, the bright white color gradually healed. Ci Hui's attack didn't cause any damage to the puppet, nor did it stop the long spear from hitting Guzhen. It was far weaker than Guzhen's huge palm. Seeing the tip of the long spear approaching, Guzhen raised the demon-subduing pestle with all his strength. Just as it touched the long spear, Guzhen's body flew up involuntarily. Puff! Just as Guzhen was sent flying, he spat out a mouthful of blood. His golden body shrank uncontrollably by more than half. Clearly, Guzhen had been injured by the battle puppet's attack. This is impossible to kill the puppet. Ci Hui's face was pale. He didn't know what to do. He was a Buddhist disciple with 4th grade elemental energy, but he had just passed through a dangerous situation. Now he was at most at the 3rd or 2nd grade. How could he cause any damage to the puppet? Ci Hui pondered, but the puppet didn't give them any time. At this moment, the puppet moved again. Its left hand slightly clenched into a fist, and it punched at Guzhen, who had lost his balance in midair. A gust of wind that wasn't inferior to the long spear suddenly sounded. Grandmaster, be careful! Ci Hui shouted. He grabbed the sword with both hands and used his psychokinesis to hack at the puppet's neck. Good timing. Seeing the puppet's huge fist coming, Guzhen wasn't frightened. Instead, he was happy. He waved his right arm, and the demon-subduing pestle hit the fist again. Bang! Kacha! The demon-subduing pestle broke on the puppet's fist into 2 pieces. Under the impact, Guzhen's body flew toward the puppet's face faster than an arrow. Kill. Seeing that he was only a few feet away from the puppet's face, Guzhan's hands formed a Buddhist mudra in front of his chest. With a roar, a brilliant Buddhist light appeared from his hands. Bursts of Sanskrit chants came from the void. The Buddhist mudra, which was at least 3 feet large, flashed in midair and fell on the puppet's head like a spider web. Kacha. The Buddhist mudra hit the puppet's face. The helmet covering the puppet's head made a cracking sound, and cracks appeared instantly. Its weakness is its head. Guzhan was exhausted when he sent out the Buddhist mudra. His psychokinesis was exhausted, but he still didn't forget to tell Xiai Hui. Roar. Before Xiai Hui could speak, the puppet seemed to be in great pain. It roared and the long spear in its hand casually slashed in midair. Rumble. With a loud sound, the long spear actually pierced into the stone wall, and a large piece of green stone was cut off by the long spear. At the same time, the puppet's other fist didn't stop at all. It swept toward where Guzhan was. Guzhan was happy and scared at the same time. He was happy because he finally found the puppet's weakness. This puppet obviously didn't have spirituality. He only needed to attack the puppet's weakness, and he might be able to kill the puppet. But he was scared because the puppet was so powerful. He had only met the puppet a few times, but he was already injured again. How could he get the ancient Buddha Kaili? Boom. While Guzhan was dodging, the puppet's fist hit the stone wall. With a loud sound, all kinds of green stone fragments scattered everywhere. Guzhan gasped and murmured, "Since ancient times, there is a saying that strength can break all spells. This puppet doesn't need any spells. As long as it has this unparalleled strength, who can defeat it?" When Guzhan was in a daze, a cold wind blew by his ear again. When he raised his head, a huge shadow appeared on his right like a dark cloud. Left elbow. Suddenly, Guzhan realized that the puppet's fist didn't work, so it naturally used its elbow. This puppet actually knows the fist and foot of the Confucian military school? Under the puppet's right elbow, a fierce wind appeared in the passage. The wind made Guzhan lose the courage to breathe. He hurriedly made a mudra with both hands, trying to block the elbow that seemed to be able to smash him into meat paste. Guzhan really didn't have any psychokinesis now. As soon as the Buddhist mudra was formed, the puppet's left elbow attacked Guzhan. With just a light touch, the Buddhist light around Guzhan disappeared. Guzhan's whole body was hit like a bullet again, and he fell on the stone wall with a scream. When Guzhan's golden body touched the stone wall, it shrank by half again, and his face became even paler. What a pity! Guzhan couldn't help sighing when he saw the puppet's right arm being hit, and also trembling. The Buddhist light transformed by the Buddhist mudra fell on the puppet's right elbow, and the puppet's right arm immediately became stiff. He knew that his psychokinesis was insufficient, so he couldn't make a similar Buddhist mudra again. This combat avatar was incomparably huge, and the materials used to refine it were definitely rare and precious. Only by breaking the elbows and knees of this combat avatar would he be able to defeat it. In order to completely smash the puppet, he needed his Buddha's palm. But would he have a chance to use it again? Chapter 34-42. Grandmaster, saving your life is more important. Don't fight. Xiai Hui was nearby. Seeing the battle puppet's arrogance, the stone wall shattered, and Guzhan's golden body withered. Xiai Hui hurriedly shouted, "Battle puppets are good at fighting. We don't have psychokinesis now." Guzhan sneered. "If my psychokinesis wasn't exhausted, why would I do this? If you have the heart, why don't you offer your Saraira? You said it very well earlier that you would help me get the ancient Buddha Saraira. Now is the time for you to help me. Offer your Bodhi Saraira. After I swallow it and add more psychokinesis, I'll be able to kill this battle puppet with Buddha palm." Xiai Hui clenched his teeth. Without any hesitation, his face showed a kind of desperation. Then he cried out miserably, "Okay, Grandmaster knows. It's not that I don't want to offer my Saraira, but what?" Guzhan sneered. "But you also want the ancient Buddha Saraira, right?" Alas, Xiai Hui sighed and took a few steps back. He patted his forehead and chanted, "Namo Amitba." A Buddha light flashed above Xiai Hui's head, and a human-shaped Saraira flew out from his Niwen palace. Although this relic was in the shape of a human, This human form was extremely damaged. Not only was its head missing, but its limbs were also missing. Its body was riddled with holes, and it was no different from a beehive. Looking at the 4th grade lotus platform below the relic, it was also shattered like broken cotton. If it wasn't for the dim Buddha light that formed the human shape, it would be impossible to tell that this was a human-shaped Sarira. Ah! Guzhen was surprised to see the human-shaped Sarira. He shouted, "Xiai Hui, why is your Sarira so broken?" Guzhen raised his head slightly and looked at the broken Bodhi Sarira. He answered faintly, "In the passage, Grandmaster showed his invincible power to kill the strange insects. I was helpless and could only use the Sarira to attract the insects." You Guzhen's voice trembled. He didn't expect Xiai Hui to make such a big sacrifice. After all, Sarira was the foundation of a Buddha's cultivation. Moreover, Xiai Hui's Sarira was the Bodhi Sarira, which was the proof of his attainment in this life. Xiai Hui's actions were clearly for the sake of saving Guzhen, and she had tossed her current life's attainment beyond the 9 heavens. Since this disciple has already promised Grandmaster, I can naturally give this relic to Grandmaster to consume today. Xiai Hui looked at the blue light flashing rapidly around the puppet as it struggled to break free from the shackles on its arm. She said indifferently, "Moreover, this disciple originally planned to do so. However, martial ancestor's psyche force is currently lacking. Even if I deliver the relic, I'm afraid martial ancestor will be unable to execute the Buddha's palm again. In the end, you still can't bear to." Guzhen sneered again. Xiai Hui paid no attention to Guzhen's ridicule, and continued to say, "Disciple will use my own strength to stop the war dolls, and help Grandmaster obtain the ancient Buddha's fortune. Of course, whether or not martial ancestor can obtain it will depend on martial ancestor's fortune." With that, Xiai Hui waved her hand and the azure lion she was sitting on appeared out of thin air. Xiai Hui then said, "Martial ancestor, this azure lion has accompanied disciple in cultivation for many years. If martial ancestor is able to leave, please take it with you." Roar! The azure lion roared angrily, and auspicious clouds appeared under its feet as it charged towards the war dolls. "Silly child," Xiai Hui softly reprimanded. "Our fate has come to an end. Don't be angry." Roar! The azure lion let out a sorrowful cry, but it didn't dare to disobey Xiai Hui's words. It obediently lay down in the air, and tears dripped from its eyes. "Xiai Hui, what are you doing?" Guzhen frowned slightly and asked in confusion. But before Xiai Hui could answer, his Elohis sounded again. Dong! The passage shook again. The war dolls had already broken free from their shackles, and were walking towards the 2 people. Xiai Hui didn't pay attention to it. She waved her left hand, and half of the green lotus root fell into her hand. She pointed her hand at the top of her head, and chanted, "The green lotus burns my body. The Sarira helps me to live forever. The flesh serves the lotus platform. The golden body protects Buddhism." Before Xiai Hui's chanting fell, the sound of Sanskrit resounded in the passage, and countless tiny heavenly flowers appeared out of thin air. When Xiai Hui's body touched the top of her head, it immediately collapsed, transforming into tiny lotuses. These lotuses flashed with 7-colored Buddhist light, and rushed towards the Bodhi Sarira in the air. This Guzhen didn't understand at first, but suddenly turned pale with fright. He shouted, "This is the flesh lotus of the Xiang sect. You don't want the cultivation of 9 lives? You don't want to enter reincarnation? You don't want to attain Buddhism?" Guzhen asked no 3 times in a row. Obviously, he was extremely puzzled by Xiai Hui's action. Xiai Hui's body had already transformed into half of a lotus, but his voice still came. "Grandmaster has given up a lot in her life to protect Buddhism. Now that her state of mind has been possessed by the devil, I'm afraid that she can't attain Buddhism in the future. This ancient Buddha Sarira is what Grandmaster needs in this life. If Grandmaster can fulfill her wish, she will definitely be able to kill the devil in her heart. If she can keep a useful protector for Buddhism, how can I not attain Buddhism?" Xiai Hui's voice wasn't loud, but it was extremely clear in the cadence of the Sanskrit words. There was no solemnity, only a faint calmness. This calmness, together with the sky, spread throughout the entire passage, even penetrating the stone walls. This as a protector of Buddhism, Guzhen obviously couldn't understand Ci Hui's actions. He knew very well the drawbacks of the flesh lotus of the Xiong sect. Ci Hui turned his body into a lotus and sent it into the Saraira. Although the Bodhi Saraira was completed, Ci Hui's body was gone. Ci Hui had no chance to enter reincarnation. His body, and even the negative karma condensed by the Saraira, had completely ended in this life. Even if he had the chance to enter Buddhism again, he would no longer be Ci Hui. Moreover, if Ci Hui didn't enter reincarnation, how could he become a human again? In these few breaths, Ci Hui's body completely disappeared, and the Bodhi Saraira gradually became full again. In particular, the 4th grade lotus was complete. Ci Hui's voice came from the Bodhi Saraira. Amitabha, Grandmaster, take care. As long as you have kindness in your heart, a protector is also a Buddha. Before his voice died away, Ci Hui's Bodhi Saraira flashed rapidly, turning into a 7-colored lotus and falling towards the approaching war puppet out of thin air. The war puppet's long spear suddenly pierced out. The tip of the spear that could tear the void fell on the colorful lotus, but it missed. The lotus covered the war puppet's head without any suspense. Whoosh! At the critical moment, the war puppet suddenly dodged to the left. When the lotus fell, it hit the right side of the war puppet. Swish! The sound was softer than the sound of the poisonous water falling from the alms bowl. The 7-colored lotus turned into a rainbow and rushed into the war puppet's body. Boom! Like a high wall collapsing. The entire right side of the war puppet's body completely collapsed. In a moment, 60% of its body was peeled off from the war puppet's body. Seeing that Ci Hui had succeeded, Guzhen urged his body to move again, forming a mudra with his little psyche power, and hit the war puppet's head again. Wu! At the same time, the rainbow rushed out of the war puppet. It was abnormally dim, but this rainbow was like a kind and unyielding war soul. With a turn, it rushed towards the war puppet again. Unexpectedly, the war puppet shook the long spear in its left hand, and the whole spear turned into a big hand in an instant, covering the rainbow. The war puppet hissed, and the big hand suddenly shrank. In a flash, the rainbow was condensed into a thumb-sized crystal bead. Then, the war puppet swung its hand, and the crystal bead turned into a trace in the air, hitting Guzhen's Buddhist mudra. This war puppet actually knew how to give someone a taste of their own medicine. Bang! With a loud sound, the crystal bead condensed by Ci Hui's Dharma power broke Guzhen's Buddhist mudra. Without any delay, it immediately rushed into the stone wall behind Guzhen, and a huge crack appeared on the stone wall. Guzhen's body was even knocked back, and he slumped to the ground after hitting the stone wall. Whoosh! With the same sound of flowing water, the rainbow crystal bead that had sunk into the stone wall unyieldingly rushed out again, and hit the war puppet's face. However, the war puppet raised its hand tightly, and immediately grasped the crystal bead. This time, the war puppet did not hesitate. The war puppet closed its hand, and with a crack, the crystal bead was instantly crushed. When the crystal bead turned into rainbow-colored fireflies and scattered in the air, the Sanskrit chants that had filled the sky just now suddenly stopped. Guzhen struggled hard, but he could not stand up. He stared at the rainbow-colored fireflies, and he knew clearly that Ci Hui did not exist in this world anymore. Boom! Right at this moment, something unexpected happened. Only about 30 meters away from Guzhen, an extremely dazzling blue light shone from the aqua-blue wall. The light was like a bright moon, and Guzhen couldn't help but close his eyes. In the bright moon, a figure walked out with the light, and the huge stone wall collapsed in the light. Guzhen paled in fright. He could not help but squeeze himself against the wall, as if that was the only way to protect himself. He narrowed his eyes and stared at the figure, trying to get a better look at him. The figure was only 8 feet tall, and his eyes were slightly closed in the light. His body flashed with rainbow-colored brilliance. Looking from afar, he was a full-bodied heavenly court, and a rainbow-colored monk's robe was draped over his body, with thousands of golden runes flowing and flashing on it. Looking at the figure's head, the 5 buns on his hair were very eye-catching. However, Guzhen only glanced at the figure's appearance before his eyes fell on the figure's hands again. The figure's hands were not clasped together, but raised slightly. In his left hand was a green lotus, and in his right hand was a treasured sword. It was no different from C.I. Hui's sword. This is the ancient Buddha rainbow. Guzhen was shocked at first, but then he came to his senses and exclaimed while looking at the rainbow-colored light. Now that he had seen the ancient Buddha rainbow, how could Guzhen control himself? He struggled to fly up from the ground, but unfortunately, before he could stand up, the fireflies that had been crushed by the war puppet rushed into the rainbow-colored ancient Buddha rainbow, like swallows returning to their nest. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.